Chapter 463. Besides the inner armor, there was also a pair of boots made by Qing. Compared to the plain inner armor, the boots were much more extravagant. There was a tiger head with golden edges, which complemented the radiant armor. Qing's taste was still as refined as ever. Ouyang Shua took the boots and looked at the attributes. Name: Azure Glow Boots, purple gold. Type: armor. Weight: 15 kg. Defense: 85. Toughness: 75. Characteristics: increases movement speed by 10. Evaluation: made from the scales of a king beast. Excellent toughness, high quality, and extremely malleable ethereal force. Using ethereal force to refine, it can increase all attributes and even level up. It was another rare item. The Azure Glow Boots had the best attribute of a pair of boots, and it could increase movement speed by 10. With the help of ghostly shadow, floating wind, Ouyang Shua's movement speed was astonishing. With this pair of boots, Ouyang Shua's equipment was simply too extravagant. Let's go eat. Ouyang Shua put away the inner armor and boots in a good mood. He patted Qing's head. Yes, I'm really hungry. Qing took Ouyang Shua's arm and walked out of the workshop. August 18th, Royal City. The morning fog had yet to disperse. The thin sunlight was refracted by the fog and disappeared. The morning breeze brought with it a slight chill. Ouyang Shua was dressed in the radiant golden armor, azure dawn war boots, a scarlet divine martial cloak, and the scarlet knight sword at his waist. Accompanied by Song Jia, Yingyu, and the others, he walked out of the southern protectorate with his head held high. After a month, Ouyang Shua once again put on his armor, indicating that Shanghai City's internal adjustments had come to an end. The pace of expansion would quicken, and the entire southern region of China would once again be filled with bloodshed. Dressed in armor, Ouyang Shua was no longer the gentle lord from yesterday, but an iron-blooded general. On the square of Royal City, the Imperial Guard Division had already assembled. The expedition this time was to be teleported to the enemy's rear, so it had to be kept a secret. The entire Royal City had been completely sealed yesterday, so outsiders couldn't see the situation inside. Xiao He and the other officials were already waiting on the square to send the Marquis off. Farewell, Marquis. I'll leave the matter of the territory to you, Minister. Everything that needed to be said had already been properly said yesterday, so there was no need to repeat it. Thus, Ouyang Shua only nodded simply before leaping onto his horse and taking the lead to head towards the teleportation formation. The 200 divine martial guards quickly followed. Along the way, every soldier of the Imperial Guard Division saluted in unison, their expressions fervent. Speaking of which, this was the first time the Imperial Guard Division had followed Ouyang Shua into battle. Before this, although the Imperial Guard Division was known as the King's Division and the Marquis' Division, they were all under the command of Great General Bai Qi. It was no wonder that the soldiers of the Imperial Guard Division were so excited. Brother, come back soon. Bing Er's crisp voice sounded warm in the solemn military formation. Minister Xiao He and the other officials couldn't help but smile. The solemn atmosphere of the expedition was immediately diluted. Ouyang Shua, who was on horseback, waved his hand at the little girl, faintly smiled, and then disappeared into the transmission array. Depart. Seeing this, Lin Yi led the royal guards and followed closely behind, passing through the teleportation formation. Zhaoqing Prefecture, Wulong County. Wulong County was a third-level county, located at the northernmost part of Zhaoqing Prefecture. The lord of the county was called Chili Strip Prince. In order to not expose his target, Chili Strip Prince had no choice but to lead 3,000 troops south with the alliance. The person stationed at Wulong County was the number 1 official under Chili Strip Prince, Du Sijing. Du Sijing, courtesy named Jingfu. He first served Kublai in the Fan Mansion and learned from Su Hong. He was promoted from Pingyang Daotong Ji to the Imperial Censor, Assistant Minister of Revenue, Minister of Secretariat, and Supervisor of Shund, Anxi, and Bianliang. In the 28th year of the Ji Yuan dynasty, he was appointed as a political advisor in the Secretariat. In the 10th year of Dade, he became the left Minister of Secretariat. After Wu Zong ascended the throne, He retired and studied medicine during his time at home. Although Du Sijing wasn't famous, he was a rare and capable official. Du Sijing lived in the Yuan dynasty, which was ruled by the Mongolians. It was not easy for a Han official to become the left minister of secretariat in the Yuan dynasty. Chili Strip Prince was extremely lucky to have this person as his assistant. But he was born at the wrong time. To meet a tyrannical lord like Ouyang Shuo as his neighbor, he could only submit. As the saying goes, a wise man submits to circumstances. The reason why Chili Strip Prince was able to make such a decision was because of Du Sijing's influence. From Du Sijing's point of view, regardless of victory or defeat, the Lord of Zhaoqing County would not have a good ending. Needless to say, the outcome was clear. Even if the Lord of Zhaoqing County was lucky to win, he would either be swallowed up by the Southern Alliance or face a second attack from Shanghai City. Regardless of the situation, the outcome was not good. This was the helplessness of the weak. Rather than that, why not place a bet and lean towards Shanghai City? Sending charcoal in the snow was better than adding flowers to brocade. Naturally, Du Sijing was not the only one in Zhaoqing County who could see the situation clearly. But only Chili Strip Prince had the courage and decisiveness to make such a decision. Just based on this point, Chili Strip Prince was superior to most people. The facts proved that Chili Strip Prince's choice was correct. Chili Strip Prince's goodwill was rewarded handsomely. The position of county magistrate and the title of viscount, although it was not as prestigious as the Lord of Wulong County, but it was stable. After the end of the Battle of Giant Deer, the war between the lords of the wilderness had reached its peak. In a vast land of China, there were wars breaking out every day. Every once in a while, a territory would be removed from the wilderness and become history. The victors were ambitious, while the losers were ignored. Only the strong could survive. Every lord carried heavy pressure, afraid that the moment they woke up, they would be attacked by the enemy. Thus, for people like Chili Strip Prince to be able to retreat safely, it was already extremely fortunate. Ouyang Shuo might not even accept the surrender of ordinary lords. After all, if he accepted too many lord players, it would be disadvantageous to the governance of the territory, and it would be the most unstable factor. Thus, Ouyang Shuo was willing to sacrifice even more to wipe out the enemy on the battlefield. This alliance was also forced by the Southern Alliance, to the point where he had no other choice. Other than strategic considerations, Du Sijing was also an important factor that Ouyang Shuo had to consider. He had led his troops to Wulong County. Other than attacking the rear of the Allied forces, he also wanted to observe Du Sijing from a close distance. Before coming, Ouyang Shuo had specially taken the time to look up Du Sijing's information. This person's resume could be considered to be dazzling. He had experience in local politics and had been in the imperial court before. If there were no accidents, after this battle, he would definitely be given the position of prefectural governor. The group of civil officials in Shanghai City consisted of middle-level officials and basic officials. With the recruitment of Confucian scholars and graduates of the Southwest Great Academy, they could still maintain their positions. However, they were still lacking in important officials who could take charge of an area. This was especially so for the prefectural governor. The game map had expanded by 10 times, and a prefectural governor was actually equivalent to a provincial governor in history. An imperial governor, in any dynasty, was a high-ranking official, and it was a position that tens of thousands of officials could not reach even if they worked their entire lives. Thus, those scholars who did not have much experience would not be able to take on such a big role, and had to be filled by experienced officials. Just like Liezhou prefectural governor Bao Shuya, although he was the prime minister of a country, in history, the area of Qi was roughly the size of a province in Shandong, and in the game, it was equivalent to a county. To Bao Shuya, being a prefectural governor was basically his limit. Compared to Bao Shuya, Du Sijing was not inferior, and was even better. The only problem was his loyalty to Ouyang Shuo. This was also the biggest problem with such talent. To attack Zhaoqing County, Ouyang Shuo had no choice but to choose a prefectural governor. Ouyang Shuo's original choice of prefectural governor was Song One. Unfortunately, Song Wen's performance in Tianshuan County was just passable, and if Ouyang Shuo forced Song Wen to take the position, it would be hard to convince the masses. Thus, Song Wen still had to gain experience before he could take on high position. The fall of Tianshuan County could be considered a lesson for Song Wen. If he could learn from it, his future potential was worth looking forward to. Excluding Song Wen, there was a better choice. The Imperial Guard Division's appearance in Wulong County immediately caused a commotion. The people in the city looked at the army with bewildered eyes, trembling with fear. Everyone knew that Wulong County only had a few thousand city guards now. If the enemy came, Wulong County would not be able to escape. Fortunately, the crowd heaved a sigh of relief when they saw what happened next. Du Sijing pays his respects to the Protector General. Du Sijing led the civil and military officials in the city and rushed over to pay his respects. Ouyang Shuo could not put on airs in front of Du Sijing. After all, they were still in a cooperative relationship, not a subordinate relationship. Lord Du, it's an honor to meet you. Ouyang Shuo got off his horse and cupped his fists towards Du Sijing. Please. Seeing that the Southern Border Protector General did not show any arrogance, Du Sijing relaxed. If there were no accidents, the person in front of him would be his future lord. No one would believe that Du Sijing did not have any ulterior motives. He led his troops and took over the defense of Wulong County. Ouyang Shuo led his 200 personal guards to the Lord's mansion. Although Ouyang Shuo was confident that the other party would not play any tricks, he still had to be on guard. Who knew if there were spies of other lords in Wulong County? After entering the Lord's mansion, Ouyang Shuo had no intention of meeting with the nobles of Wulong County. After exchanging some pleasantries, he returned to the residence Du Sijing had arranged for him, saying that he was not feeling well. In less than 10 minutes, the person in charge of the Black Snake Guards in Wulong County arrived at Ouyang Shuo's courtyard. The Divine Martial Guards knew of the Black Snake Guards and immediately let them in after verifying their identities. Marquis, tell me, what's the situation outside? Ouyang Shuo no longer had a warm expression on his face. Instead, his expression was cold. To be continued. Chapter 464. After listening to the Black Snake Guard's report, Ouyang Shuo frowned. The entire north of Zhaoqing County, including Wulong County, had a total of 12 territories. Every city had around 1,000 to 2,000 soldiers, which was nothing to worry about. What was troublesome was the 50,000 patrolling Iron Cavalry. The 50,000 Iron Cavalry's main camp was located 15 kilometers north of Tianshuan County. According to what the Black Snake Guards knew, the 12 cities had formed a wartime alliance. Whenever a city was attacked, the 50,000 Iron Cavalry would be the first to receive the news and rush over to reinforce. Seems like the Southern Alliance has an expert to guide them. The entire north of Zhaoqing County had been set up by the Alliance Army, and there were no gaps. Ouyang Shuo's goal was to take down Tianshuan County and cut off the Alliance Army's rations. Wulong County was 3 days away from Tianshuan County. The Alliance's 50,000 Iron Cavalry were patrolling the entire north of Zhaoqing County. Thus, if they wanted to attack Tianshuan County, they had to first take care of the 50,000 patrolling Iron Cavalry. If not, they would be caught in a pincer attack. With a regiment, they had to fight against 50,000 soldiers and 1 against 5. Considering that they still had to attack Tianshuan County after the battle, they could only use their wits. Without detailed information, Ouyang Shuo did not dare to make a move. On the same day, Ouyang Shuo sent out 10 teams of scouts to investigate the enemy's movements. Zhaoqing County, Yunnan County. The 220,000 Alliance Army had already gathered at Yunnan County. Along with the army were large amounts of rations and siege weapons. Endless amounts of rations were transported from Tianshuan County to Yunnan County. The 50,000 vanguard troops had already investigated the deployment of Shanghai City's army, and the members of the Southern Alliance once again gathered to discuss the battle plan. This time, it was no longer a one-man show for HFO and the rest. The strategists and military leaders from the various territories all appeared. After all, they were the best at commanding battles. HFO and the rest were only in charge of strategy. Amongst the generals, there was one that was the most eye-catching, and that was the Northern Song Dynasty's famous general, Di Qing. Di Qing, courtesy name Han Shun, had tattoos on his face and was skilled in archery, and was known as the Nirvana General. He was born in poverty and was courageous and good at scheming. In the Song Dynasty and Xia Dynasty, he fought with disheveled hair and wore a copper mask, charging and breaking through enemy lines, and achieved outstanding military service. In the imperial court, Yin Zhu, Han Qi, Fan Zhongyan, and other important officials all had a good relationship with him. Fan Zhongyan taught him the spring and autumn annals of his clan. Because of this, Di Qing studied hard and became proficient in the art of war. He was promoted to the position of Deputy Privy Commissioner. Di Qing had fought 25 battles in his life, and he was most famous for his night attack on Kunlun Pass. When he was alive, he was suspected by the imperial court, which led to his death and depression. After his death, he was treated courteously and admired. He was posthumously conferred the title of Secretary of the Secretariat and given the posthumous title of Wuxiang. In military affairs, it is taboo for an outsider to command an expert. HFO looked around and said, "Therefore, I propose that from today onwards, we lords will live in seclusion behind the scenes and no longer interfere with military affairs. As for the military affairs, I'll leave them to the generals to handle. What do you think?" Alliance Master is right. I agree. Agreed. All right, then it's settled. Buddha, he made the decision and continued. If that's the case, then we have to choose a commander to lead the army. The commander-in-chief's orders are our orders. Any general of a territory who dares to disobey a military order will be dealt with by the commander-in-chief according to military law. We lords cannot plead for leniency on their behalf. What do you think? Good. That's right. All the lords knew that although the Allied army was strong, it was not without hidden dangers. The biggest hidden danger was that the soldiers in the army came from dozens of territories. If there was no military law to restrict them, they would be like a plate of loose sand. With just a few words, Buddha, he had swept away the two biggest hidden dangers of the Allied army. It was truly amazing. Even Ruan Ping had no choice but to accept it and not jump out to cause trouble. Without any surprises, Di Qing was elected as the commander-in-chief of the army. In front of all the lords and generals, Di Qing obtained the right to command. Buddha, he, and the others immediately left the tent and handed the entire battle to Di Qing to command. Di Qing was a meticulous and taciturn person. He would first carefully consider the chances of success before choosing the right opportunity to win before attacking. It was somewhat similar to Bai Qi's combat style. The arrangements in the north of Zhaoqing County were made by Di Qing. Di Qing knew that in a big battle, provisions were the most important. Tianshuang County was the supply center of the Allied army. Heavy troops must be sent to defend it. The lords retreated, and Di Qing officially entered the tent to discuss matters. Just like the rumors, Di Qing wore a bronze mask, and his hair was disheveled. He sat at the head of the table and exuded a majestic aura. All the generals of the Allied army were convinced by him. The enemy has 3 cities in a 3-pronged formation. How should we break through it? Di Qing, on the other hand, was a maverick. He threw the biggest problem to the generals at the table right from the start. When the generals heard this, they looked at one another and didn't know what the commander-in-chief meant. Logically speaking, since it was a discussion, it meant that the commander-in-chief already had a plan in mind. He just had to make arrangements, and there was no need to ask for the opinions of the generals. What they didn't know was that this was where Di Qing was smart. He knew about military matters. Although the generals present didn't have any objections to him becoming the commander-in-chief, they didn't know what they were thinking. Since ancient times, there was no first in literature and no second in martial arts. Thus, Di Qing wouldn't act arbitrarily right from the start. Instead, he used this chance to understand the personalities of the generals present. Once they were familiar with each other, he would make plans. Knowing oneself and the enemy was the only way to win 100 battles. Di Qing's trip wasn't to know the enemy, but to know himself. What? Do you all have no ideas? Seeing that the tent was silent, Di Qing spoke up. It was better to provoke the generals than to send generals. We should gather our forces and attack one of the cities. As expected, a general couldn't help but stand up and say loudly. Di Qing shook his head and said, "Since the enemy's 3 cities are like horns, they will naturally cooperate with each other. Attacking one city is actually pulling a hair and affecting the whole situation. If we are careless, the enemy might find an opening and turn the situation around. Don't forget that the enemy's commander-in-chief is the invincible Bai Qi. Apart from that, even the immortal soldier Han Xin is in the enemy's formation. I don't need to explain the commanding ability of these two. I'm sure all of you know it, right?" The generals were speechless. "Commander-in-chief, aren't you raising the enemy's morale and lowering your own?" The generals in the army were all courageous, and not a single one was a coward. Someone stood up and retorted, "Our army has an absolute advantage in terms of military strength. Naturally, we can concentrate our forces to attack one city and also divide our forces to guard against the other 2 cities and cut off the connection between the 3 cities. This way, the 3 cities will be fighting alone. The choice will depend on the commander-in-chief's words." "Well said." The generals cheered and swept away the previous dejection. When Di Qing heard this, he nodded slightly and said, "General's words make sense. However, you have forgotten one thing. Commander-in-chief, please enlighten us." The general who retorted didn't dare to be impudent. The enemy's 3 cities are the 3 talents formation and can be switched at will. Although our army has the advantage in terms of military strength, it is slightly lacking compared to the enemy. Secondly, it was formed in a hurry and lacks tacit understanding. Just these 2 points are enough to offset a portion of our military strength. Thus, the actual difference in military strength between the 2 armies isn't that big. Actually, there was another point that Di Qing didn't point out because he wanted to give face to the generals. That meant that the generals of the Allied army were far from the enemy army. Any one of the generals from Shanghai City was a famous general in the world. Their ability to adapt to the situation was far stronger than those present. In such a large battle, the advantage was too obvious. As expected, although the generals were a little unhappy, they didn't refute. When Di Qing saw this, he looked around and said solemnly, "That's right. The current situation doesn't allow us to casually set up formations. If there are too few attacking troops, we won't be able to take down the city. If there are too many, the defending troops will be reduced, and we might not be able to stop the enemy. If we aren't careful, we will lose everything." His words showed how careful Di Qing was when it came to using troops. When the generals heard this, they were all impressed. "Commander-in-chief, please instruct us." Only at this moment did the generals come to their senses. Commander-in-chief definitely had a comprehensive plan for this battle. When Di Qing heard this, he knew that the time was ripe and the generals had basically acknowledged him. Only then did he reveal the battle plan. The key to this battle is the real situation. What is the real situation? There are 2 meanings. Firstly, the enemy's real situation. We only know the generals defending the 3 cities. We don't know how many troops they have. If we can't find out the enemy's real situation, we won't be able to start this battle. Any city could be a trap, and we can't act rashly. When the generals heard this, they all nodded their heads. Secondly, the real situation of our army. Since we don't have an absolute advantage in terms of military strength, we have to make it so that the enemy can't see through us. Before we officially attack, we have to make it so that the enemy can't be sure which city we are attacking. When our trump card is revealed, the outcome of the battle will be decided. This is the real situation. Clap, clap. Waves of applause rang out in the tent. After Di Qing's analysis, the general's confidence in this battle increased by several times. Di Qing reached out and pressed down to calm down the applause in the tent. He continued, "The 2 words real situation are easy to say but not easy to execute. The most important thing was to investigate and test the waters. Thus, after the discussion ends, we have to send out more scouts to find out about the enemy's real situation. We can't let go of any of the places around the 3 cities." "Yes, Commander-in-Chief. Scouting and investigation is just the prelude." The enemy is stationed in the cities, and all the city gates are probably tightly sealed. It will be hard to get detailed information. Thus, the most effective way to find out about the enemy's real situation is to attack the 3 cities. Use a small number of sacrifices in exchange for first-hand information. With Di Qing's words, who knew how many soldiers would die on the battlefield? All the generals knew that the enemy was not easy to deal with. To find out about the enemy's real situation, normal probing was completely useless. Although it was said to be probing, it was actually a real fierce attack. Only continuous attacks could make the enemy reveal an opening. Even so, not a single person spoke out against it. The merciful did not lead an army. None of the generals would be soft-hearted. Listen up, Commander-in-Chief. Commander-in-Chief, please give the order. More than 10 generals stood up in unison, their voices loud. From tomorrow onwards, the army will split into 3 groups and launch probing attacks on the 3 cities. If the enemy doesn't reveal flaws, they will not retreat. If they don't blame the commander-in-chief for being merciless. With a swoosh, Di Qing pulled out the sword at his waist. The sword light flashed, and a corner of the table fell. A cold aura emanated from Di Qing's body. Together with the bronze mask, it became even more terrifying. Yes, Commander-in-Chief. The generals were shocked and didn't dare to slack off. The next day, the Allied army split into 3 groups and launched probing attacks on Yaogu District, Sanqing District, and Gunglo District. To be continued. Chapter 465. On the city wall of Song County, Bai Qi looked at the army in the distance, his expression changing. The enemy was advancing very slowly. Every time they moved a certain distance, they would stop and regroup. Because the enemy was made up of dozens of troops, it was inevitable that they would be out of sync. If they did not stop and regroup from time to time, the entire army would be scattered before they even reached the foot of the city wall. Bai Qi's observation was very meticulous. He counted in his heart. The intervals between the enemy's stops and regroups were getting longer and longer. The entire army was getting more and more orderly, adapting to each other's marching rhythm. The other party was a cautious person. Bai Qi had a definition of the enemy's commander. Of the 220,000 Allied troops, 40,000 were stationed in Yunnan District. The remaining 180,000 were divided into 3 groups, advancing toward the 3 cities. On the official road, flags were everywhere, swords and spears were everywhere, kicking up a cloud of dust. The army was like 3 sharp knives, stabbing at the army of Shanghai City at the same time. An army of 60,000 was not much of a problem for Yaogu District, which was guarded by 2 divisions. Even Gunglo District would not be exposed under Han Xian's command. The key was Song County. There were only 10,000 soldiers defending Song County, and they were from the Tianshuang District's City Guard Division. Faced with an army 6 times their size, Bai Qi was not confident. If they continued to attack, the City Guard Division would definitely reveal a flaw. What should he do? Bai Qi knew that he had to take action. Otherwise, the next attack might be 80,000 or even 100,000 soldiers. Should he mobilize the Dragongxiang Legion's 2nd Division, which was lying in ambush outside Gunglo District? That was the worst option. Once Luo Shixin's division was mobilized, the enemy would be able to see the actual situation of Shanghai City's army. Not only that, Bai Qi's previous arrangements would be for naught. Bai Qi did not turn around and asked, "Who is the enemy commander?" Northern Song's famous general, Di Qing. The person who answered Bai Qi was the chief intelligence officer of the Military Intelligence Department. Whenever there was a war, the Military Intelligence Department would station intelligence officers in the various departments to oversee the military's intelligence matters. Even the reconnaissance squads of the various departments would be under the command of the intelligence officers during wartime. Thus, through the Military Intelligence Department, the Army would be able to build an efficient, unified, and coordinated intelligence network. They would be able to use all kinds of resources to obtain information from the front line. Di Qing? Bai Qi frowned. He only knew a little about history. Send a letter to the military office immediately. Ask them to send us the most detailed information on Di Qing. Yes, sir. As the sun set in the west, the Allied forces left behind thousands of corpses and retreated like a receding tide. They had no intention of stopping them at all. Under the sunset glow, the soldiers' faces were filled with fatigue, joy, and even fanaticism. This was war. Compared to the high morale of the Allied forces, the soldiers on the city wall were only left with endless fatigue. Some of the soldiers leaned against the city wall and fell asleep. Only his hands were still tightly hugging onto the halberd. On the first day alone, the City Guard Division was already in a perilous situation. If not for Bai Chi's strong command, the enemy would have long since seen through the weakness of Tsang County. Even so, there was no trace of joy on Bai Chi's face. They had already reached their limit. At most tomorrow, the weakness of Tsang County would be completely exposed to the enemy. Bai Chi had no choice but to prepare for the worst. He ordered Luo Shixin's division to prepare to reinforce Songqing County at any time. In fact, Luo Shixin was also not feeling well today. The enemy's scouts were like mad dogs, running around in the wilderness. Left with no choice, Luo Shixin could only send out scouts of the same level. In the wilderness, the scouts fought with each other to prevent the enemy's detection. Even though the scouts sent out were intentionally misleading. But if this continued, the division's hiding place would be exposed. After all, they were an entire cavalry division. It was too difficult to hide. Night fell. The bustling Tsang County returned to its rare tranquility. On the streets, other than the patrolling soldiers, not a single person could be seen. After a day of fighting, the soldiers had already entered dreamland. They rested and rested, preparing for the battle the next day. General Bai Chi's room, however, was still brightly lit. Inside the room, Bai Chi sat upright, carefully reading through Di Qing's file that had just been sent over by the military office. The entire file only had 4 pages and a few thousand words. Not only was there a brief introduction of Di Qing's life, but there was also a personal comment from the Chief of Operations, Zhao Kuo. Although the Chief of Operations was thousands of miles away, they were able to know about the battle in Zhaoqing at any time. Cautious in using troops? As expected, Bai Chi muttered to himself, "If that's the case, then I'll beat them at their own game." Bai Chi put down the file and decided to take a gamble. For Bai Chi, he rarely made risky moves. However, the way the situation developed was not something he could control. The only variable now is the Imperial Guard Division led by the Marquis. Bai Chi raised his head and looked out the window. The bright moon hung high in the sky. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. Tomorrow would be another good day. Wulong County, Lord's Mansion. After receiving the latest battle report from Bai Chi, Ouyang Shua knew that he could not wait any longer. If they lost the battle, the consequences would be unimaginable. What would the Chili Strip Prince think when that happened? Ouyang Shua could not entrust the fate of his territory to a temporary ally. The human heart was the most complicated. If Shanghai City lost, and the Chili Strip Prince turned around and sold Shanghai City, it would be troublesome. Ouyang Shua had once read a book and liked a famous saying, "If you don't want to be betrayed, don't give the other party the chance to betray you." In his previous life, Ouyang Shua did not understand, which was why he was betrayed. In this life, he understood. Thinking of this, a cold light flashed in Ouyang Shua's eyes. "Guard, here! Lord Du, please come here." "Yes." The guard turned and left. After a while, Du Sijing hurried over. His eyes were filled with doubt. He did not know why he was summoned. "Sit." Ouyang Shua's expression did not change. Hearing this, Du Sijing sat down respectfully. He was feeling more and more uneasy. "I have something to ask you, Lord." "At your command, Marquis." The more courteous Ouyang Shua was, the more uneasy Du Sijing became. He had just sat down, but he immediately stood up. "Lord, you don't have to do this." Ouyang Shua raised his hand, indicating for Du Sijing to calm down. Du Sijing heard this, and a trace of sadness flashed across his face. His performance tonight was really unbearable. "I heard that if the 12 territories in the north are under attack, they can inform the 50,000 cavalrymen at any time. Is that true?" "That's right." "Is there a standard to judge an attack? Or is it that once the alarm is sounded, reinforcements will arrive? In addition, are there 50,000 reinforcements coming, or only a part of them? I asked the Marquis to know. Du Sijing calmed his mind. Since the establishment of the wartime alliance, there has not been a single territory that has sounded the alarm. It's just that before the battle, the commander of the 50,000 cavalrymen has already passed down orders to all the territories. If there is an attack, they must report the number of the enemy before they can coordinate. Ouyang Shuo heard this and nodded. If that's the case, then I ask Lord Du to send a message tomorrow. Tell them that Wulong County is under attack and ask for reinforcements. This, Du Sijing was puzzled. Then wouldn't the Marquis be exposed? Ouyang Shuo smiled, but did not speak. Suddenly, a light flashed in Du Sijing's mind. His face instantly paled. He already understood the other party's intentions. The other party wanted to lure the 50,000 cavalrymen into a trap and then annihilate them. This plan could be said to be vicious. The problem was that this plan was not within the scope of their previous discussions. It was obvious that if Wulong County lied about the military situation and lured the 50,000 cavalrymen over, regardless of the fate of the 50,000 cavalrymen, the identity of their lord, the chilly strip young master, would be exposed and he would be the first to suffer. At that time, death, to the chilly strip young master, would only be an extravagant hope. The enraged alliance would shudder at the thought of how to treat a traitor. Thinking of this, how could Du Sijing not be afraid? Seeing Du Sijing's expression, Ouyang Shuo sighed in his heart. He knew that the other party had seen through his intentions. He also knew that this was unfair to the chilly strip young master. Unfortunately, Ouyang Shuo could not wait any longer. He did not know when it started, but Ouyang Shuo's heart was becoming harder and harder. But to announce the news of the attack, he had to use Du Sijing. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo had to appease this person first. Otherwise, everything would be over. To Ouyang Shuo, this was also a dangerous move. The Southern Alliance could be considered powerful. It made Ouyang Shuo and Bai Qi take such a dangerous move. After this matter, I will give your lord an explanation. Ouyang Shuo looked at Du Sijing. He did not make any specific promises. He believed that Du Sijing would understand. At this moment, any promise could not be compared to an explanation from Ouyang Shuo. Although Ouyang Shuo had a cold heart, it did not mean that he would go back on his words. On the contrary, he would never go back on his word. Otherwise, it would be a fatal blow to his prestige. Du Sijing's expression changed when he heard this. Ouyang Shuo was relaxed. He raised his teacup and took a sip. Since Du Sijing persuaded the chilly strip young master to form an alliance with Shanghai City, Ouyang Shuo knew that Du Sijing knew how to judge the situation and weigh the pros and cons. To deal with such a person, it was all about benefits. As long as he saw that temporary losses could be exchanged for greater benefits in the future, he would definitely agree. Unexpectedly, after Du Sijing struggled, he proposed a condition. Marquis, you must promise to save my lord from the alliance after the battle. Du Sijing's expression was unusually firm. If Ouyang Shuo did not agree, he would not compromise. Even if his life was in the hands of the other party, he was not afraid. It seemed that Du Sijing had already disregarded life and death. The chilly strip young master had indeed raised a good official. Ouyang Shuo looked at Du Sijing. He was overjoyed. This could only prove that his judgment was correct. If Du Sijing agreed without hesitation, he would be slightly disappointed. I promise you. To be continued. Chapter 466. P.S. Zhao Kuo has been corrected to Du Ru Hue in the previous chapter. On the boundless sea, waves rose one after another, rolling up thousands of piles of snow. The two fleets, more than 200 warships of various sizes, formed into battle formations and advanced through the waves. Several flags were hung on the masts of each warship. The golden dragon was noble, the blue dragon vast. The two enormous dragons reflected each other's splendor. Among the fleets, the two enormous 5-story ships were the most eye-catching. These two ships were the flagship of the North Sea Bay Fleet's First Fleet, Flying Cloud, and the flagship of the Cliff Mountain Fleet's First Fleet, Gai Hai. The two ships stood on the left and right, like two giants in the deep sea leading the fleet. Apart from a few pirates, the fleet had no opponents along the way. Even the large pirate organizations in the nearby seas retreated when they saw such a huge fleet. On the topmost deck of Flying Cloud stood three generals looking into the distance. Standing in the middle was the strategist of this expedition fleet, Chief of Operations Zhao Kuo. Because the two fleets didn't belong to each other. Therefore, Zhao Kuo was both the strategist and the commander of the expedition fleet. The young general on the left was the commander of the Divine Martial Guards, General Wang Feng. The one on the right was naturally the commander-in-chief of the North Sea Bay Fleet's First Fleet, Pei Donglai. On the Gaihai were the commander-in-chief of the Cliff Mountain Fleet's First Fleet, Kai Mao, and the deputy commander-in-chief, Smoke Demon. Pei Donglai and Kai Mao were the left and right generals of the entire fleet. In comparison, Kai Mao's commanding ability was much better than Pei Donglai's. However, Pei Donglai's qualifications were there. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was the founder of Shanghai City's navy. Secondly, the North Sea Bay Fleet's first fleet had been formed earlier. The soldiers were of a higher rank, and their combat ability was stronger. Therefore, the North Sea Bay Fleet's first fleet was the main force in this battle. This was also why Zhao Kuo and Wang Feng stayed on Flying Cloud. As for Wang Feng, his responsibility was only for the battle after they landed. The Divine Martial Guards wouldn't participate in a naval battle. Although if there were no accidents, there wouldn't be a large-scale naval battle. The sea breeze rustled the three's cloaks. Pei Donglai held the nautical chart in his hand and pointed at the faintly discernible coastline in front of them. Advisor, we will arrive at Jiaozhou port in an hour's journey. Zhao Kuo nodded, then asked, has there been any news from the Scarlet Horseboat we sent out? Yes, Pei Donglai answered. Jade Buddha County also has a dock and harbor at Jiaozhou port. They even had a navy patrolling the nearby seas. However, they're all small warships, nothing to worry about. Issue the mobilization order. Upon hearing this, Zhao Kuo knew that the battle was over. Yes, sir. Pei Donglai waved the flag, and the war drums sounded. The entire fleet accelerated once more, rushing toward Jiaozhou port. A fleet like this had to land at the port, so there was no need to hide. Jiaozhou port. More than 10 small and medium-sized warships cruised leisurely in the harbor. Jiaozhou port was considered an inland port, so pirates rarely attacked it. Rather than defending against pirates, the entire Jade Buddha County Navy camp was more like protecting the safety of the fishermen. It was more like a search and rescue team. Zhao Wu was a veteran lookout on one of the Navy's warships. Staying on the mast, he was bored to death. The sea was mysterious, and it was also something people yearned for. But looking at it day after day, anyone would be tired of it. Zhao was like that. Now, all he prayed for was to quickly end this patrol mission, return to the city, and spend some time with his peach blossom. Sigh. Zhao Wu sighed, then glanced at the distant sea to see if there were any unfortunate fishermen whose boats had capsized and needed their help. In fact, Zhao Wu really wished that he had something to do. Being a lookout was lonely. Other than the sea breeze, there was no one to talk to, not even the sea breeze. After being a lookout for so long, Zhao Wu had even developed the habit of talking to himself. To the air, to the seabirds, to the sea, he could say it all. What he talked about was none other than the trivial matter between him and Peach Blossom. The surrounding seabirds had long since grown tired of listening to him and refused to visit his lookout anymore. Even if there was food to entice them, it wouldn't work. If they heard too many mushy words, they would spit out the food they had just eaten. Squatting on the lookout all day, Zhao Wu's but was about to grow hemorrhoids. The salty sea breeze made his cheeks hurt. The cracks on his cheeks were frightening. Every time she returned to the city, Peach Blossom would shed a tear. Women were made of water. When she was gentle, she was as gentle as water. Even her waist was like a water snake, twisting and turning. It made his heart burn, and he wished that he could die on Peach Blossom's soft, plump, and fair body. Sometimes, water was also a big problem. Every time Peach Blossom cried, Zhao would feel annoyed. Women were like that. unable to endure even a little pain. In reality, this bit of crack was nothing to him. Zhao Wu. Zhao Wu, on the other hand, hoped that he could really fight with the pirates, get injured, and leave behind a scar or something. That would be a real man. Perhaps he could even get some money to buy peach blossom, a jade hairpin, or something. He would never be like this, receiving a meager military salary and having so much money in his pocket. He had caused such a cute girl like Peach Blossom to suffer with him. How vexing. Men had to be rich. Without money, no matter how strong they were, they would still have to act weak in the face of life. What a shitty life. Zhao Wu grumbled again. He spat into the sea and was about to turn his gaze away. Just as he turned around, Zhao Wu froze. He rubbed his eyes and looked at the distant sea again. What he saw almost scared his soul out of his body. On the sea where the sky and water met, warships after warships were rushing over like giant beasts. There were so many that Zhao Wu couldn't even count them. As far as his eyes could see, all he could see were warships. Other than the large number, the key was the domineering warships. They were as tall as a few stories, taller than the Lord's Mansion in Jade Buddha County. Zhao Wu swore that he had never seen such a tall warship in his life. Was that still a ship? It was practically a fortress on the sea. In comparison, their warships were like trash, like little shrimps. For a moment, Zhao Wu was so shocked that he couldn't speak. His entire mind was blank. It's over, it's over. I'm really going to die in the sea this time. Zhao Wu's face was pale. He no longer had the lofty aspirations he had just now. What military merits, what rewards, they could all go to hell. He could only pray that he would be lucky enough to escape this calamity and keep his life. Although life was tough, there was always hope as long as he was alive. If he died, there would really be nothing left. Alert, sound the alert. Zhao Wu tried his best to calm himself down. Only then did he remember his duty. Trembling, he sounded the alarm on the observation deck. For a moment, the atmosphere of the entire harbor became heavy. Of course, there were sailors on the deck who didn't care. They thought that Zhao Wu was fooling them again. Zhao Wu had done this kind of thing many times in the past. Cruising was boring. This kind of thing could be considered a form of entertainment. As Zhao Wu sounded the alarm, he looked at the sea again. While he was in a daze, the fleet opposite him was clearly visible. There's no pirate flag? As a lookout, Zhao Wu's eyesight was naturally excellent. Although he was far away, he could already see the huge flag of the warship opposite him. A golden dragon? What kind of flag is that? Could it be the legendary fleet from Chuanzhou? The heavens took pity on him. Fifth Zhao was just an ordinary commoner. To be able to know of the existence of Chuanzhou, he had to rely on his advantage as a crew member. He could be considered a man who had seen the world. Otherwise, he would only be able to see Jade Buddha County. Other than Chuanzhou, Zhao Wu couldn't think of any other place in his mind. The fleet was getting closer and closer. Zhao Wu could even see the armored soldiers on the warship. The ice-cold armor reflected a dazzling light under the sunlight. They really weren't pirates. Zhao was already convinced that pirates wouldn't have such military discipline. Those damned bastards were all filthy. How could they have such an imposing manner? Zhao Wu couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. They're not enemies, not enemies. At this moment, there was chaos on the deck. There was no need to confirm it. The soldiers on the deck could already see the approaching fleet. The panic it caused was no different from Zhao Wu's. Zhao Wu could only pray that the various gods and Buddhas and matriarch would be able to hear his prayers. Other than praying, he was a lookout and couldn't do anything else. This feeling of leaving his fate to the heavens was really uncomfortable. Unfortunately, Zhao Wu's prayers didn't work. After a while, a rain of arrows pierced through the air, turning the Jade Buddha County Navy into porcupines. Unfortunately, Zhao was also hit by an arrow. Coincidentally, it hit his heart. How unlucky! Zhao Wu couldn't take it anymore. He fell from the observation deck and landed on the deck. With a dull thud, he died instantly. At the last moment, what appeared in Zhao Wu's mind was Little Peach's snake-like waist. I really want to touch it again. In an instant, Zhao Wu fell into complete darkness. The massacre at Jiaozhou port started quickly and ended just as quickly. In less than half an hour, apart from the expeditionary fleet, there wasn't a single intact warship left in the vast port. The wreckage of the ships and the corpses of those who were shot by arrows floated on the surface of the sea. Even the nearby fishermen who couldn't escape in time suffered the same fate. A fire at the city gate would bring disaster to the fish in the moat. Dock and disembark on Flying Cloud. Zhao Kuo was expressionless as he watched the scene unfold before him. Such a victory wasn't worthy of praise. The real battle had yet to begin. Yes, sir. The two fleets docked in an orderly manner. The first to disembark was naturally the Divine Martial Guards. The real battle was about to begin. To be continued. Chapter 467. The entire port was in chaos. Wang Feng led the Divine Martial Guards and stepped onto the wooden planks from Flying Cloud. Jiaozhou Port was similar to North Sea Port, a port for both military and civilian purposes. The Navy of Jade Buddha County still had about 200 soldiers stationed at the military camp at the port. The rest were fishermen. Ouyang Shua's army wasn't a pure killing machine. Their opponents were the defenseless civilians. Unless they had no other choice, they wouldn't kill for no reason. Thus, the moment the Divine Martial Guards landed, they went straight to the Navy's camp. The Navy soldiers also had combat power on land. Just like the two fleets, apart from leaving a portion at the port, the rest were going to fight on land. Otherwise, the Divine Martial Guard alone wouldn't be able to take down Jade Buddha County. While the two sides were still fighting on the sea, the Navy soldiers had already assembled. Facing the menacing enemy, Ing Zheng wanted to retreat into the city, but he didn't dare. Desertion was a capital offense. Of course, even if they stayed, they would be like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. In front of the Divine Martial Guards, they couldn't resist at all. After clearing out the Navy at the port, the entire fleet disembarked. Every Navy formation was equivalent to a division. The two formations, apart from those stationed at the port, could gather 18,000 elites to fight on land. Adding on the Divine Martial Guards, the 20,000 army rested for a while before heading straight for Jade Buddha County. At this time, Jade Buddha County was heavily guarded, the city gates tightly shut. The city guards were waiting on the city walls. If it was a pure Navy fleet, they really wouldn't be able to do anything to Jade Buddha County unless they had cannons. Shanghai City had planned this for a long time. How could they not be prepared? Moving archer towers and siege ladders were unloaded from the ships and assembled on the spot. The 100 moving archer towers were the key to this battle. Among the soldiers of the Navy, other than the sword and shield soldiers, the most important were the archers. With the help of the moving archer towers, they suppressed the firepower of Jade Buddha County city gates. The Divine Martial Guards acted as the vanguard, and with the help of the siege ladders, they reached the top of the city walls in less than an hour. Jade Buddha County's City Guard Division, Hifu took 5,000 elites with him, leaving 8,000 soldiers. Facing more than 20,000 attacking troops, they shouldn't have been in such a sorry state. Unfortunately, their opponents were the Divine Martial Guards who had defeated the Tyrant's River East warriors. Every Divine Martial Guard could fight against 10 Divine Martial Guards. Once this group of Hell warriors charged up the city wall, the consequences could be imagined. By 11 in the morning, the Divine Martial Guards had completely occupied the city wall. Jade Buddha County was officially conquered. After conquering Jade Buddha County, Zhao Kuo followed Ouyang Shua's instructions before he left. He did not destroy the territory's stone tablet. Instead, he arranged 500 Divine Guards to guard the teleportation formation. Outside the perimeter, 2,000 archers were on standby. If Buddha he dared to lead his troops back to rescue them, he would be turned into a hedgehog before he could even walk out of the teleportation formation. Apart from that, Zhao Kuo also assigned 10,000 soldiers to control the city gate of Jade Buddha County, the Arrow Towers, and all other important places, such as the Lord's Mansion, the Treasury, the Granary, the Armory, and other important places. The entire Jade Buddha County was under the supervision of the army. The rest of the soldiers left the city under the command of 1,000 Divine Guards and continued to sweep through the affiliated territories of Jade Buddha County. They swept through the entire territory. When Jade Buddha County was under attack, Buddha, he who was thousands of miles away, had already received the system notification. At that moment, Buddha he's face turned pale. His first reaction was to lead his troops back to rescue them. Just as he was about to look for Di Qing, he stopped before he could walk out of the room. He could not go. Once they returned, the entire Alliance army would probably fall apart. What was more troublesome was that Yunnan County was only a city that had been occupied by Shanghai City. There was no teleportation formation there. If he wanted to return, he had to rush to the rear to teleport back. This was the brilliance of Bai Qi. When the Allied army moved south, Bai Qi began to shrink the battlefront. He even took the initiative to retreat from the cities that he had occupied. He was determined to build a defensive chain around their headquarters in Songqing City. In this way, the Allied army could not directly teleport their troops over without Bai Qi noticing. If they wanted to send more troops from the rear, they would not be able to escape the detection of the military intelligence department. Now, it all depended on whether the Allied army had the courage to cut off all means of retreat. When Di Qing was summoned by Buddha, he was a little confused. After probing again in the morning, Di Qing could basically confirm that the enemy's headquarters, Songqing City, was the weakest point of the three cities. Killing God Bai Qi had a good strategy. Unfortunately, Di Qing did not fall for it. The reputation of killing God did not intimidate him. This time, Di Qing wanted to touch the butt of the tiger. Di Qing was already planning to adjust the deployment of the troops from tomorrow onwards. He would concentrate his forces to attack Songqing City. Once Songqing City fell, the defeat of the enemy would be right in front of him. Di Qing was very confident about this battle. With his cautious character, he would not leave any opportunity for the enemy to take advantage of. Once the weakness of the enemy was determined, Di Qing was also a person who would stake everything on one throw. He wanted to annihilate the other party before they could react with the force of a thunderbolt. Even if he was killing God, if he had no troops, he was still a tiger without claws. When he thought about how he could defeat Bai Qi in a head-on battle, Di Qing's calm heart could not help but ripple. At this moment, his master urgently summoned him. Di Qing suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. He was able to obtain the command of the army because of his master. Logically speaking, his master should not be interfering with the affairs of the army at this time, unless something extraordinary had happened. Di Qing's premonition came true. When he heard from his master that Jade Buddha County had fallen, he was also dumbfounded. His expression was no different from Buddha, he just now. Brilliant! Di Qing no longer had a trace of complacency in his heart. Jade Buddha County was thousands of kilometers away from Shanghai City. Even by water, it would take more than 10 days. In other words, Shanghai City had already planned to attack Jade Buddha County at the beginning of the battle. In terms of strategic layout, the Allies had already lost the city. What do you mean, my master? Di Qing looked at Buddha, his thoughts unfathomable. Based on his experience, sending troops to rescue them now would not only be of no help, but they might even fall into the enemy's trap. Jade Buddha County had been attacked, but there was no news of it being occupied. Why? There were only two reasons. First, the enemy had been attacking for a long time, and Jade Buddha County was still under the control of the city guards. Second, Jade Buddha County had fallen, but there was no final blow. Di Qing did not need to think carefully to directly rule out the first possibility. The generals of Shanghai City were not fools. Since they had been planning for a long time, how could they not bring enough troops for the expedition? If they did not have full confidence, why would they make such an unnecessary move? Therefore, Di Qing was almost certain that Jade Buddha County must have fallen. If they were to teleport back at this time, what awaited them was not the welcome of the people, but a vast rain of arrows. Even so, Di Qing did not dare to directly persuade his master to give up the idea of rescuing them. He was very clear in his heart what a territory meant to a lord. In Buddha's heart, wasn't he struggling too? He called Di Qing over so that he could come up with a plan. Hearing Di Qing's question, Buddha, he sighed in his heart. This matter still needed him to make a decision. If you don't return, Are you confident that you could defeat the army of Shanghai City? Buddha he raised his head and looked at Di Qing solemnly. Di Qing's heart trembled when he heard this. He knew that his lord was going to bet her entire life on this battle. After weighing the pros and cons, Di Qing said cautiously, "With the current military strength and my judgment of the battlefield, it should not be a big problem to defeat the army of Shanghai City. But to defeat or even annihilate the enemy, it will be beyond our power." Di Qing's answer did not contain a trace of exaggeration. Any bit of misleading information could affect the Lord's judgment. Hearing this, Buddha's expression was complicated. Di Qing did not disappoint him. In less than 2 days of commanding the army, he had already grasped the key to victory. However, it was far from enough to defeat the enemy. If he wanted Buddha, he to give up Jade Buddha County. The only way was to establish a foothold in the southern part of Zhaoqing County. In this way, it was not a loss for him to exchange Jade Buddha County for half a county. In order to establish a foothold in the southern part of Zhaoqing County, he had to defeat the army of Shanghai City so that they could not organize a second expedition in a short period of time. In this way, Buddha he would have time to take over the southern part of Zhaoqing County, reorganize the army, and build fortifications to fight against Shanghai City. It was even possible for them to take back Jade Buddha County. After listening to his master's plan, Di Qing was speechless for a long time. His master's move was indeed extraordinary. She had put herself in a desperate situation to survive. The key now lay in Di Qing's hands. After a long silence, when he had calculated all the factors in his mind, Di Qing spoke again. "My master, give me another 50,000 soldiers. I will definitely be able to defeat the enemy and drive them out of Zhaoqing County." "Good." Buddha he slammed the table and stood up, full of heroic spirit. "I will solve the problem of military strength. I will leave the matters of the battlefield to you, General. I hope that you can do what you say and do not disappoint me. I am willing to make a military pledge. If we do not win this battle, I will bring my head to see you." Di Qing's expression was solemn as he risked his life. Buddha he shook his head. "I don't want your head. I want victory, understand?" At this moment, Buddha he was like a gambler who had lost all his money. "Understood." Di Qing nodded. "Go." Buddha he waved his hand tiredly, his voice hoarse. "Latest the day after tomorrow, 50,000 soldiers will definitely arrive at Cloudon County." When Di Qing heard that, he bowed and took his leave. After sending Di Qing off, Buddha he walked out of the room. He wanted to gather the members of the Southern Alliance for an urgent meeting. He also needed to find a suitable reason to convince his allies to send more troops to Zhaoqing County. It was not easy to imagine how difficult this would be. Mobilizing 3,000 soldiers was already the limit. Now he had to mobilize another 1,000 soldiers. It was like cutting off his own flesh. To be continued. Chapter 468. I don't agree. In the meeting hall of Yunnan County, Ruan Ping was the first to stand out and oppose Buddha his suggestion. "Our army is already at the upper hand in the war. Why should we increase the risk?" Although Ruan Ping did not know why Buddha he suggested to increase the number of troops and what was the reason behind it. Based on his intuition, Ruan Ping knew that he definitely could not let Buddha he achieve his goal. If not, Buddha he's influence in the Southern Alliance would be like the sun in the sky. Lord Ruan is right. Please give us an explanation, Alliance Master. After the battle in Tianshuang County, Ruan Ping's influence in the Southern Alliance could not be underestimated. He also had a group of allies that supported him, and within the alliance, they were already able to contend against Buddha he. The opposition of his allies was within Buddha he's expectations. He looked around and repeated Di Qing's judgment of the battlefield, and then said, "Everyone, this is a rare opportunity. Once we defeat the Shanghai City Army, the alliance will not only be in the Lingnan province, but the entire China region. Other than that, the entire southern Zhaoqing County will be in the alliance's pocket. In this way, not only will all of you be able to make up for the losses you suffered during this expedition, you'll even be able to make a profit. So why not?" Buddha he wanted to use his fame to drag his allies down. "This is only General Di Qing's judgment. What if we fail? Alliance leader, have you ever thought about mobilizing so many troops? If we fail, the entire Lingnan province will be in a precarious situation, and there will be no peace. Ruan Ping saw that someone was tempted and jumped out again. It had to be said that Ruan Ping, this young master of an aristocratic family, had a very accurate grasp of the human heart. Ordinary lords did not have Buddha's boldness. Compared to advancing, the lords subconsciously placed self-preservation as their priority. In this battle of Zhaoqing, if not for the Shanghai City army that was about to reach their doorstep, the Southern Alliance might not have been able to move. Everything has risks. How can we be 100% sure? Buddha, he was unhappy with Ruan Ping's unreasonable pestering. Since there are risks, Alliance Master, you can't drag us down with you for your own benefit. Ruan Ping did not let go, and had the intention to continue arguing. Seeing this, Buddha, he knew that it was meaningless to continue arguing with Ruan Ping. He simply bypassed Ruan Ping and said directly, in that case, the increase in troops this time is entirely voluntary. However, after victory, the distribution of spoils of war will be determined by the number of troops dispatched by each territory. What does everyone think? Good. Buddha's suggestion was a compromise and was immediately accepted. Those who wanted to take the risk would send more troops. Those who didn't want to take the risk would stay put. Riches and honor came from danger. No one would force anyone. As it turned out, there were many greedy lords. In the end, the second increase in troops had reached a total of 60,000 people, which had already exceeded Di Qing's previous expectations. Ruan Ping's expression turned awkward when he saw this. He had lost again in this battle. After the meeting was adjourned, the lords sent letters to their territories and began to mobilize their troops. By tomorrow afternoon at the latest, all the divisions would be able to gather at Yunnan County. Hearing this, Di Qing directly announced that there would be a truce tomorrow. After the second batch of reinforcements had gathered, they would launch a fierce attack on Song County the day after tomorrow, which was the 22nd of August. Of course, Di Qing would never relax his surveillance of Shanghai City's army. August 20th, Wulong County. The night was as dark as ink, and the stars were dim. There was a side courtyard on the west side of the Lord's residence. It didn't look eye-catching, but it was tightly guarded by armored soldiers. This side courtyard was where Ouyang Shuo was staying. In the entire courtyard, other than the divine martial guards, there wasn't even a maid or servant. Ouyang Shuo's daily life was taken care of by his personal guards. From Ouyang Shuo's point of view, he was fighting a war. Naturally, everything would be done according to the rules of the army. If he arranged for maids to serve him, it wouldn't look good for the soldiers to see him. Although the soldiers might not say anything, Ouyang Shuo still had to set an example. During his stay in Wulong County, he didn't even touch a drop of alcohol. Whether it was aristocrats or merchants' invitations, Ouyang Shuo also rejected them all. Ouyang Shuo spread the word that since it was wartime, everything should be kept simple. If they wanted to celebrate, they would have to wait until after the war ended. At that time, he would definitely invite everyone to a banquet, and they wouldn't stop until they were drunk. It wasn't just Ouyang Shuo himself. Although the tens of thousands of soldiers he brought with him had already taken over the defense of Wulong County, they didn't do anything to the commoners and merchants in the city. The soldiers of Shanghai City were all professional soldiers, and each of them received a generous salary. If they were to commit any acts of arson, murder, or looting to earn some extra income, Ouyang Shuo would definitely execute them. This was especially so for the Imperial Guard Division. As the marquee personal army and the trump card, their military discipline was even stricter. The commoners of Wulong County felt that after the Shanghai City Army was stationed here, they felt more secure. Just based on this point, Ouyang Shuo had made a good name for himself in Wulong County. The huge courtyard was quiet, as if it was a tranquil place, unaffected by the clamor of the mortal world. The liveliness of the outside world seemed to have nothing to do with this place. In the main room of the side courtyard, a faint orange light shone through the paper-covered window. It was warm and tranquil. The divine martial guards on night watch inadvertently caught a glimpse of the rays of light and they felt warm in their hearts. Through the shadow of the wall, they could faintly see a straight figure who was still writing vigorously. Ouyang Shua sat in front of his desk, handling the official letters that were sent to him. Among the official letters, there were Zhao Kuo's battle report from Jade Buddha County, Bai Chi's battle report from the front lines, and even the Chili Strip Young Master's latest decision to send more troops. Buddha he would never have thought that within the alliance, there were still eyes of Ouyang Shua. Every move of the Southern Alliance was reported to Ouyang Shua through the Chili Strip Young Master's secret letter. If necessary, Ouyang Shua would send some of the information to Bai Chi for him to make decisions. For example, the matter of the Southern Alliance sending more troops and Di Qing's plan, Bai Chi was very clear about it. Other than that, there were also Xiao He's requests regarding the territory's affairs, which required his approval. The official letters on the desk were piled up to a foot high. Other than the official letters, there were also secret letters from the Shanghai Guards and the Black Snake Guards, as per usual. Due to his busy schedule, Ouyang Shua could only work through the night. Too many things had happened today, and the situation had changed. Ouyang Shua was in Wulong County, and although it looked like he was far away from the center of the storm, in truth, he was the heart of the entire battle. Not even the slightest rustle of grass could escape his eyes and ears. The current Ouyang Shua was no longer the domineering leader of the past, but a true feudal lord. No matter how shocking the situation was, it would not cause a ripple in his heart. His heart was as still as water, and he had everything planned out. Regardless if it was Bai Chi, Zhao Kuo, or Xiao He, they were all chess pieces in Ouyang Shua's hands. The chess pieces were placed on the chessboard, and victory was decided 1,000 miles away. The fall of Jade Buddha County was within Ouyang Shua's expectations. But Buddha He's response was somewhat out of his expectations. This person had given him more than 3 surprises. He was truly an interesting opponent. In this chess game, Buddha He had bet everything. Unfortunately, he was not a chess player. This morning, Du Sijing had already followed Ouyang Shua's instructions and sent out the signal that his territory was under attack. According to the secret letter from the Black Snake Guards, the 50,000 armored cavalry were already on their way to Wulong County. At the latest tomorrow afternoon, the army would arrive outside of Wulong County. Buddha He's arrangements were still a step too late. He just didn't know what kind of expression Buddha He would have when he learned that his backyard was on fire and how he would deal with it. Ouyang Shua was unable to see through such a gambler, but it didn't matter. The general situation of the battlefield was already in Ouyang Shua's hands, because he was the one playing chess. No matter how Buddha He struggled, he could not escape from the palm of his hand. At this moment, the Tiger General, Lin Yi, asked to see him outside the door. "Come in." Lin Yi entered the door, bowed, and said, "Marquis, everything is ready." After a few battles, this Tiger General had become more and more mature, and he had a faint air of a great general. This young general was in the process of completing his transformation. "Got it." Ouyang Shua nodded and continued to deal with the official letter. Lin Yi heard this, quietly left the room, and quietly closed the door, disappearing into the night. "Quick, follow him." Dust flew on the official road to Wulong County. The 50,000 armored cavalry galloped past, and from time to time, the shouts of officers could be heard from the troops. Chu Yi rode at the front of the troops on his precious horse. At the end of the Eastern Han Dynasty, Chu Yi was a general under Yuan Shao's command. In his early years in Liangzhou, he was proficient in the Chang people's tactics and had led Yuan Shao's elite troops. Later, because of his arrogance, he was killed by Yuan Shao. In the game, Chu Yi was summoned back into the world through the summoning talisman and was once again put in an important position. This time, the task of guarding the rear and sweeping up the enemy troops fell to Chu Yi. For the next few days, the entire northern part of Zhaoqing County was calm and peaceful. Chu Yi was extremely sullen, and he wanted nothing more than to rush to the main battlefield and fight. When he received the distress signal from Wulong County, Chu Yi's spirits rose, and he immediately gathered his troops and rushed to Wulong County. He wanted to see which blind person dared to behave atrociously in his territory. Faster! Chu-yi whipped his horse and shouted to the back. He had been leading cavalry for many years, and he had a lot of experience fighting cavalry. Such a rapid march was nothing to him. But Chu-yi had forgotten that he was only leading a normal army, not the elite troops under Yuan Shao's command. Rushing through the night, some of the cavalry soldiers were starting to feel a little tired. Chu-yi didn't feel any pity for them. During the Three Kingdoms era of the Eastern Han Dynasty, soldiers were the private property of the general. There was no such thing as caring for them. If one group died, they could just recruit another. In a chaotic world, there was no lack of strong soldiers who wanted to join the army. At the very least, they could solve the problem of food and clothing in the army. At 10 in the morning, Wulong County was already in sight. Chu-yi had brought it forward by 2 hours. To be continued. Chapter 469. General, Wulong County is in front. The vanguard ran to Chu-yi's side and pointed at the city in the distance. Chu-yi looked up and saw a large city towering in the distance. The city walls looked somewhat dilapidated, as if they had been left behind after a great battle. Not good. Are we still too late? Chu-yi frowned. Let's go and take a look. When they arrived, they saw that the suspension bridge of the moat had already been destroyed and was leaning crookedly on the two sides of the moat. Not far away, the city gate was ajar. On the ground, there were faint traces of blood that had not been washed away. General, what should we do? The scene before them was beyond the expectations of the army. Let's go into the city and take a look. The vanguard hesitated for a moment before saying, General, in order to prevent any traps, let me lead the vanguard to investigate. All right. Chu-yi was a veteran of many battles and was not a reckless person. The vanguard led 200 cavalry and was about to cross the moat. At this moment, the ajar city gate suddenly opened from the inside. A group of about 10 people walked out, led by a civil official. Seeing this, the vanguard reined in his horse. The civil official led the group across the moat and rushed to the front of the army. He dismounted and cupped his fists. Wulong County's subordinate, Du Sijing, pays his respects to the general. I hope you will forgive me for not welcoming you earlier. In the north of Zhaoqing County, when the feudal lords were out on campaigns, they would leave behind an important official to guard their territory. These important officials were all registered with Chu-yi. Chu-yi thought for a moment and confirmed that the other party was indeed a subordinate of Wulong County. He did not dismount and pointed at the bloodstains on the city gate. Lord Du, what happened? You sent out a distress signal. Where's the enemy? It's a long story. General, please enter the city for a chat. That's fine. Lead the way. After confirming Du Sijing's identity, Chu-yi let down his guard. He would never have guessed that Du Sijing had long since defected to Shanghai City. Entering the city this time was a path of no return. However, Chu-yi was completely unaware. Of course, not all 50,000 soldiers could enter the city. Chu-yi brought 200 personal guards with him, while the rest of the soldiers set up camp outside the city. Du Sijing rode on his warhorse and followed beside Chu-yi. He saw that Chu-yi was enjoying the scenery on both sides of the street with great interest, enjoying the welcome of the commoners on both sides of the street. He couldn't help but feel sad for Chu-yi. The Marquis of Lianzhou's schemes were too terrifying. Even the smallest details were taken into consideration. Whether it was the dilapidated suspension bridge, the bloodstains on the city gates, or the welcoming crowd, everything was meticulously arranged. His goal was to make Chu-yi completely let down his guard. With this delay, it was already close to noon. Du Sijing held a banquet in the Lord's mansion to entertain Chu-yi and his party. At the same time, Du Sijing also arranged for people to send food and wine to the soldiers stationed outside the city. The 50,000 cavalrymen had been rushing all this way and were already starving. They were naturally happy to be served with such good wine and meat. The army had its own rules. According to the rules, the army stationed outside the city was not allowed to receive food and wine from the city. Even if they wanted to eat, they could only eat the dry rations and water they had brought with them. As for drinking wine, it was even more impossible. Unfortunately, Du Sijing was too enthusiastic. He said that this was the goodwill of the commoners in the city and hoped that the general wouldn't refuse. Otherwise, the commoners would feel apologetic and think that the general was looking down on them. When Chui heard this, he couldn't resist and could only nod in agreement. Since the general had agreed, the 50,000 soldiers naturally ate and drank to their heart's content. The hardships of a journey were all dissolved in the food and wine, leaving not a trace behind. Chui himself was the same. He drank the wine and bit on the drumstick. His table manners were extremely vulgar. Speak. What exactly is going on? Chui could be considered competent and didn't forget his duty. I won't hide it from the general. Du Sijing poured out his grievances as he toasted Chui attentively. The day before yesterday, an army of more than 2,000 people suddenly attacked Wulong County. We resisted with all our might and only managed to repel them. We suffered heavy casualties. Unexpectedly, the leader of the enemy clamored that they were only the vanguard and that a large army would come to flatten Wulong County in a few days. We didn't dare to be negligent, so we asked the general for help. Chui nodded. I see. Where did the enemy come from? We don't know the specifics. They wore black armor and didn't carry any flags. It's very strange. Black armor? Chui didn't know what to say either. He said loudly, "Who cares who they are? If they dare to attack again, I'll make sure they don't return." I thank the general on behalf of the people of the city. When Du Sijing heard this, he hurriedly stood up and bowed in thanks. Chui waved his hand. He was an uncouth man and couldn't stand such formalities. Just as he was intoxicated from the wine, a servant suddenly walked in. "Sir, a guest requests an audience." "Let him wait. Can't he see that I'm accompanying the general?" Du Sijing was furious. "But that person seems to have an urgent matter and said that he must report it to you personally." "I won't see him." Du Sijing's attitude was resolute. "Sigh." At this moment, Chui spoke. "Lord Du, you can go by yourself. It's fine." Then, Du Sijing hesitated for a moment and said, "The general is magnanimous. I'll be back soon." Chui waved his hand impatiently and grabbed a drumstick, starting to chew on it. When Du Sijing saw this, he stood up and excused himself. Once he left, he never returned. The place where Chui hosted the banquet was a small courtyard on the east side of the mansion. The guards that Chui brought with him were stationed in the courtyard. As soon as Du Sijing left, hundreds of archers suddenly appeared on the high walls around the small courtyard. Every archer held a divine crossbow in their hands and fired a round of shots at the soldiers in the courtyard. Instantly, screams rang out incessantly. What happened? Chui was also alert. He immediately grabbed his weapon and rushed out. He didn't even have time to wipe the oil off the corner of his mouth. Under the sudden attack, the guards that Chui brought with him had suffered heavy losses. There were less than 50 of them left. "We've fallen into a trap." Chui's heart trembled, and his face suddenly turned pale. Unfortunately, he realized it too late. "Charge out with me." Chui knew that staying in the courtyard would only lead to death. The only way out was to charge out of the mansion and join the army outside the city. Although the hope was slim, Chui still wanted to give it a try. He was full of courage. Under the protection of the remaining guards, he rushed out of the courtyard. At this moment, the courtyard's door suddenly opened from the outside. A group of armored soldiers rushed in without saying a word and directly slashed at him with their sabers. The soldiers that rushed in were Ouyang Shua's guards, 200 divine martial guards. The two groups of guards clashed in close combat. Chui's guards were naturally no match for the divine martial guards. The only troublesome one was Chui himself. In any case, he was also a king-level general. Chui's opponent was none other than Ouyang Shua. "Who are you? Tell me your name. You're actually so despicable." Chui didn't forget to get information out of Ouyang Shua as he fought. Ouyang Shua held the Sky Demon Spear and faced Chui's attacks with ease. He said with a smile, "Listen carefully. This Marquis has never changed my name. I am the Marquis of Lian Province." "What?" Chui was shocked when he heard this. He knew that there was no way out. The Marquis of Lian Province's prestige was known throughout the entire Lingnan province. As a general of the alliance, Chu Yi naturally knew about it. The consequences of the other party appearing in Wulong County were self-evident. Marquis, this general is willing to surrender. At the crucial moment, Chu Yi was able to yield and stand tall. Ouyang Shua smiled coldly when he heard this. He said, "Unfortunately, this marquis won't accept you." You. Chu Yi's face immediately turned red. He felt extremely humiliated. "Since that's the case, then hand over your life." Chu Yi was also a hot-blooded man. He simply threw caution to the wind. The two of them fought, and their battle was brilliant and varied. Unfortunately, the current Ouyang Shua was no longer an ignorant person. He was not afraid of a king-level general. The two of them fought for less than 50 rounds before Chu Yi died under Ouyang Shua's spear. Ouyang Shua had never thought of subduing Chu Yi. Firstly, Chu Yi was arrogant in history. He was not a talent that Ouyang Shua liked. Secondly, Chu Yi's loyalty could not be guaranteed if he surrendered under such circumstances. Therefore, Ouyang Shua chose to kill Chu Yi and obtain a general's soul. In less than half an hour, the remaining Chu Yi's guards in the courtyard were completely annihilated. Needless to say, all of this was a trap. The moment Chu Yi received the distress signal, the fate of him and his 50,000 steel cavalry was already decided. Other than encircling Chu Yi in the city, outside the city, Lin Yi led the Praetorian division and killed their way into the camp that the 50,000 steel cavalry hastily built. The 50,000 troops were on a long journey. They were eating and drinking to their heart's content. They did not take any precautions at all. Not to mention, the food that was sent to them was spiked, causing the soldiers' limbs to go weak. Facing a trump card like the Praetorian division, the 50,000 steel cavalry could only surrender obediently. After getting rid of Chu Yi, Ouyang Shua brought his guards back to the meeting hall of the Lord's mansion. In less than an hour, Lin Yi came to report. Reporting to the Marquis, the 50,000 steel cavalry have been defeated. 12,000 of them were killed. Other than a few who escaped, the rest were all captured and locked up in the military camp in the city. Lin Yi's efficiency was still as high as ever. Not bad. Ouyang Shua nodded in satisfaction. Act according to the plan. Understood. Lin Yi turned around and left to arrange the follow-up matters. Ouyang Shua was naturally not satisfied with just taking down 50,000 steel cavalry. His goal was to take down Tianchuan County and cut off the alliance's supply line. Tianchuan County was a strong city, and it was guarded by a large army. If they attacked forcefully, they would not be able to do anything. Although the Praetorian division fought fiercely, it was useless without siege weapons. Therefore, they had to use their wits. Because of this, Ouyang Shua set up a chain of plans. Taking down Chu Yi's army was only the first step of this plan. In just 2 hours, the Praetorian division had changed out of their radiant armor and changed into Chu Yi's armor. Other than that, their identity tokens, flags, and other items had all been changed. Ouyang Shua wanted to make use of the time difference. The news of Chu Yi's army being destroyed would definitely not reach the alliance's ears so quickly. The Praetorian division disguised themselves as Chu Yi's army and immediately set out for Tianchuan County. To be continued. Chapter 470. August 22nd, Yunnan County. The cloudy sky that lasted for several days finally cleared up. The sky was blue and cloudless. Outside of Yunnan County, the three armies were ready to depart. Yesterday afternoon, Southern Alliance had temporarily transferred 60,000 reinforcements and had already arrived at Cloudon County. Immediately, 280,000 soldiers gathered in the previously unremarkable Cloudy Peace County. The entire Cloudy Peace County instantly turned into a huge military camp. Other than the soldiers, there were also the commoners in charge of logistics. Apart from them, there was no one else. Whether it was the Black Snake Guard or the Military Intelligence Division, they were unable to infiltrate Cloudon County. The members of the Southern Alliance stood on top of the city walls, watching the army that was about to set off. All of them were in high spirits. There was a one-day truce yesterday, but there was no movement from the three cities on the other side. This also meant that Shanghai City's reinforcements would not arrive. Victory was right in front of them. Even the reputation of the Killing God could not stop the Alliance's determination to win. The only thing that was out of place was probably last night, when the Lord of Wulong County, the chilly strip prince, took advantage of the darkness to abandon his troops and disappear into the wilderness. After defeating Chu Yi's army, Ouyang Shua didn't go too far. He authorized Du Sijing to send a letter to Chili Strip Gongzi, asking him to find an opportunity to leave the Allied camp. Fortunately, Sir Spicy Strip was not eye-catching among the Allied forces. No one paid attention to his disappearance. In the eyes of the Allies, there was only the impending war. Last night, Di Qing had already set up his tent and drawn up a battle plan. The 280,000 Allied troops were divided into two groups, with 80,000 troops each to monitor Yaogu District and Gunglo District. The remaining 120,000 soldiers swarmed out and headed straight for the headquarters of Shanghai City's army, Gray County. All the siege weapons brought by the Allies were also gathered in the center. Di Qing wanted to take down Azure County in one fell swoop with the momentum of a thunderbolt, not giving his enemies any chance. After a simple oath, the three armies set off at the same time. Di Qing, the commander-in-chief of the army, personally led the Central Army and resolutely advanced towards Songqing County. By noon, the army had arrived at the outskirts of Song County. Right here, the temporary camp that the Allies had built the day before yesterday was still intact. Di Qing ordered the army to rest and reorganize at the campsite. In the afternoon, they would officially launch an assault on Gray County. Atop the city walls of Blue County, Bai Qi stood at his familiar position and gazed into the distance. The army on the other side was vast and mighty. They didn't hide their tracks at all, and their aura was like a rainbow. Distant water could not quench present thirst. Yesterday's victory in Wulong County could not immediately save Song County from its dire situation. Bai Qi had already made his preparations to give up on Song County. It was not his style to fight a war despite knowing that it was impossible. Defeat was defeat. However, before retreating, Bai Qi wanted to teach his opponent a lesson. The attack in the afternoon was unusually smooth, just as Di Qing had expected. Although the army stationed in Song County put up a strong resistance, they were outnumbered. Under the continuous attacks of the Allied forces, they were forced to retreat. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the moat fell. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the north wall fell, and at 5:30, the north gate fell. In the end, the army of Shanghai City chose to abandon their position and hastily retreated through the southern gate. After the Great Battle, less than 2,000 of the 10,000 City Guard Legion survived. The designation of the Tianchuan County City Guard Division would probably become history. The Allied army flooded in from the north gate, completely occupying Song County. It was a historic moment. This was the first time that the army of Shanghai City had been forced to flee in panic. Di Qing's name was destined to be recorded in history. With this battle, the name of the Southern Alliance would spread across the world. Upon receiving the news of Song County's fall, Yunnan County was in a state of celebration. The members of the Southern Alliance had already started celebrating. Some had already arranged for the players to be teleported back to their territories, removing the restrictions on the channels and forums, and started to announce the epic victory on the forums. Even Buddha He, who had always been calm, could not help but sing out loud. After this battle, Buddha He's reputation in the Alliance reached its peak. He truly lived up to his position as the Alliance leader. Just like Ouyang Shua's rallying power in the Shanghai Alliance, Buddha He had the same prestige in the Southern Alliance. The members of the Southern Alliance were already talking about dividing the spoils of war in the southern part of Zhaoqing County. The dozens of cities were like a huge cake, waiting for them to divide it. The members who did not send in reinforcements were naturally vexed. The entire alliance sank into a fanatical atmosphere. Other than the members of the Southern Alliance, the various rulers of the northern part of Zhaoqing County were also extremely excited. The victory of this battle meant that their territory was finally protected. The various rulers were just short of setting off firecrackers to celebrate. It was fortunate that Chili Gluten Young Master was not in Yunnan County. If not, they would be extremely worried. Song County. Di Qing walked into the city with his head held high and chest puffed out under the protection of his generals. Commander, should we lead the troops to chase after them? A general ran in front of Di Qing with an excited expression and requested to be sent to battle. No. Di Qing shook his head. His attitude was firm. Do not chase after a cornered enemy. The enemy still has a hidden regiment that has yet to reveal themselves. If we continue to chase after them, we will fall into their trap. Di Qing was also excited, but he did not let the victory get to his head and remained calm. Commander is wise. The general was impressed with Di Qing's judgment. The older the ginger, the spicier. Di Qing's cautiousness in using troops was not without reason. Taking over Song County, breaking the enemy's 3 talents formation, and dealing a heavy blow to the enemy's morale, Di Qing's strategic objective had been achieved. He did not want to draw legs on a snake, and even more so, did not want to complicate matters. Now, the initiative of the battle was firmly in the hands of the alliance. Based on Di Qing's style, he should fight steadily and surely, and not give the enemy any chance to take advantage of. In truth, there were no ambushes outside of the city. Even under such circumstances, Bai Qi did not mobilize Luo Shixin's regiment. After a few battles, Bai Qi had some understanding of Di Qing's character. This person was cautious in using troops, and he would not rashly chase after them. In this comparison, Bai Qi was still more skilled. Divine generals were called divine generals not only because of their combat prowess, but also because they had a deep understanding of the enemy's character and used it correctly. Bai Qi did not set up an ambush, but within the city. With Bai Qi's character, since he was going to fight, he would make the enemy feel pain. Small fights were not his style. After taking over Song County, over 100,000 troops entered the city. At night, in the Lord's Mansion of Song County. This Lord's Mansion was once the command center of Shanghai City's army, and Bai Qi worked here. Now, the owner of the Lord's Mansion had been changed to the famous General Di Qing. After settling the troops, Di Qing went to the tent to discuss the battle the next day. After taking over Song County, the alliance had 2 choices. One was to attack Yagu District in the west, and the other was to attack Gunglo District in the east. On the surface, there were 2 divisions stationed in Yagu District, and they had the advantage in terms of military strength. Therefore, some generals suggested to cooperate with the right army to take down Gunglo District first, and then concentrate all their forces to surround Yagu District. However, Di Qing did not see it that way. Tomorrow, we should concentrate our forces and annihilate Yagu District in one fell swoop. The 2 divisions in Yagu District are the pillars of the enemy. Once they are defeated, the entire alliance will only have 1 division left. There's nothing to fear. Di Qing's voice was still calm and deep. On the contrary, if we attack Gunglo District first, once the army in Yagu District hears the news and retreats, or takes the opportunity to launch a counterattack, it will be a hidden danger. Gunglo District is different. With just the strength of a single division, we won't be able to do anything. Commander is wise. Di Qing nodded and was about to issue a military order. Suddenly, there was an urgent shout from outside the door. Commander, Commander, bad news. Who's making a ruckus outside? Bring him in. Di Qing was furious when he heard that. He could not tolerate his subordinates not following the rules. The guard who shouted was pulled into the meeting hall. Speak, what happened? Why are you panicking? What a scandal. Commander, bad news, there's a fire. The guard was still in a state of shock and could not speak clearly. What fire? Where is the fire? Di Qing was benevolent and did not scold the guard too harshly. The city is on fire. Everywhere is on fire. Clang. The teacup in Di Qing's hand instantly fell to the ground and broke into pieces. God of slaughter Bai Qi. Everything happened too quickly. It was late at night, and the Alliance army was having their meal in the military camp. While the Alliance army had just occupied Song County and the city was in chaos, Shanghai City's suicide squad, which had been hiding in every corner of the city, appeared one by one and lit the firewood that they had prepared. Instantly, the flames soared to the sky. The entire Song County was engulfed in a sea of fire. The four city gates were the main areas where the fire spread. Most of the houses in Song County were made of wood. The raging fire was like a merciless god of death, turning the entire Song County into a sea of fire. The screams of countless living beings lingered in the fire. Under the protection of the soldiers, Di Qing fled out of the city in a panic. The Alliance army and countless innocent civilians in the city were not as lucky as him. The fire spread too quickly and too suddenly. All the main streets and exits were blocked by the fire. There was no way to escape. Other than that, the thick smoke that accompanied the fire was like a god of death. Countless people suffocated to death in the thick smoke. "Bai Qi, you lunatic!" Di Qing cried as he looked at the fire in the city. In order to kill the Alliance army, Bai Qi dragged tens of thousands of civilians in the city down with him. "Butcher, god of death." With such a cruel victory, Bai Qi announced the return of the god of death. In the end, less than 20,000 of the Alliance army managed to escape the city. Including the civilians in the city, a total of 150,000 people were buried in the sea of fire in a single night. The entire Song County was completely reduced to ashes. Bai Qi used his cold heart to use the fire to completely turn the situation around. After this battle, the repercussions were very serious. From then on, whenever Ouyang Shuo patrolled Zhaoqing County, he would have to take a detour around Song County. He was afraid that if he showed himself, he would be skinned alive by the surrounding civilians. To be continued. Chapter 471. P.S. Thank you, Cold Pervert, for the 50,000 Chidian coins. There will be more updates. Thank you. If the fire that the killing god Bai Qi set in Song County was the nightmare of Di Qing and the Southern Alliance, then their nightmare was far from over. August 23rd, Gunglu County. It was early in the morning. Nature had not awakened yet, and the wilderness was quiet. Dew gathered on the branches, forming small water droplets, sparkling and translucent under the light of the morning sun. The temporary camp of the left army of the Allied forces was also silent. Yesterday afternoon, the news of the Central Army's victory had already reached the camp. The entire left army immediately relaxed. The only surprise was the fire that came from the direction of Song County at night. But the distance between the two cities was too far. The left army had no idea what had happened in Song County. Those who did not know would think that the Central Army was holding a bonfire party to celebrate their victory. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the rumbling of horse hooves, startling countless birds and beasts. A large number of dewdrops were thrown into the air by the impact of the war horses, illuminating the entire world. It was like a quiet and serene landscape painting had suddenly intruded into a noisy, acrobatic troupe. The air was instantly filled with the smell of gunpowder. The immortal soldier Han Xian, who had been biding his time, finally revealed his fangs, giving the enemy a fatal blow when they were at their weakest. This was Han Xian, an unfathomable assassin. Facing his prey, Han Xian had enough patience and had an insight and decisiveness that ordinary people could not reach. It was fine if he did not attack, but a single attack would be fatal. Last night, after receiving Bai Qi's message, Han Xian had been planning this shocking attack. The 1st Division of the Tao Leopard Army stationed in Gunglu County moved out in full force, cooperating with the 2nd Division of the Dragon Xiang Army outside the city, and suddenly launched an attack on the left army camp of the Allied Army. The two divisions, one in the south and one in the north, one in the front and one behind, surrounded the enemy camp. The camp of the left army was only a temporary camp. Not even wooden walls were built. Countless tents were placed together in a disorderly manner, like a refugee camp. The two armies, with the fastest speed, broke into the camp like a sharp knife. The previously silent campsite was suddenly filled with noise and clamor. The shouts of the patrolling soldiers, the gathering of the officers, the neighing of the war horses, and even the snoring of the soldiers all gathered together, making one feel annoyed. Immersed in their sweet dreams, the soldiers of the left army were all sleepy and yawning. Under the command of their officers, they hurriedly put on their cold armor, picked up their spears, and walked out of the tent, ready to face the enemy. The entire campsite was in a mess. The cavalry could not find their horses, and the soldiers could not find their officers. The left army, which was in a hurry, was powerless against the elites of Shanghai City. The Alliance army of 80,000 men was being herded like sheep by the Shanghai City army of less than 30,000 men, and they were being slaughtered like rats. The war horses were neighing, and their blood was boiling. The cavalry division, led by Luo Shixin, was an elite force that was second only to the Imperial Guard division in Shanghai City. The tens of thousands of golden-armored cavalrymen were like gods, venting all the anger and grievances they had accumulated over the past few days. The spear struck, and the saber gleamed coldly. Divine soldiers descended from the heavens. Under Luo Shixin's command, the various cavalrymen split up and attacked together, cutting the entire campsite into pieces. The Alliance army on the left army could not gather together at all. If there were more than 1,000 of them, they would be scattered by the golden-armored cavalrymen. The light cavalry division, led by Wei Zhang, was also unwilling to fall behind. In the campsite, they advanced steadily, attacking together, outflanking, and annihilating the enemy, dragging countless enemies into the abyss of death. At this point in the war, the Alliance army could no longer organize an attack. Even if Di Qing was here, it would be useless. Needless to say, the commander of the left army was just an ordinary general. He did not have the ability to win in the chaos, nor did he have the prestige to help stabilize the army. The entire left army was originally formed by dozens of allied armies. In a situation where the battle situation was unfavorable, the drawbacks were completely exposed. The entire army instantly became a pile of loose sand. The dozens of armies fought on their own. In the chaos, the instinctive reaction of the soldiers was to gather with the soldiers of their own territory. The more they did so, the more chaotic it became. The general could not see the overall situation on the battlefield, nor could he command the army. Once an army lost contact with the command center, it would collapse right in front of them. In the end, it could only be a complete collapse. Tens of thousands of soldiers howled like ghosts as they were beaten to the point of abandoning their helmets and armor and fleeing in panic. Just like that, the Alliance army on the left army was completely defeated. Han Xian's saber strike was accurate and ruthless. In this battle, the army of Shanghai City killed more than 15,000 enemies and captured more than 40,000. The entire left army was left with only 20,000 cavalrymen, who fled to Yunnan County in a sorry state. That was not the end. Han Xian ordered Wei Zhang's division to clean up the battlefield and detain the prisoners of war. Luo Shixin's division continued to pursue. If possible, it would be best if they could take down Yunnan County in one fell swoop and destroy the enemy's nest. One must know that there was not a single soldier in Yunnan County at the moment. Once the left army of the Alliance was broken, what was in front of the army was a wide, open road. Han Xian was going to give him a taste of his own medicine. Luo Shixin led the cavalry division and chased after them. Like peeling an onion, he cut down the 20,000 allied soldiers who were fleeing in panic layer by layer. Countless corpses fell off their horses, forming a road to hell. The allied cavalrymen could only hate the fact that their war horses were not fast enough. It never occurred to them that even the remnants of their forces were more than the number of Luo Shixin's division. The remnants of their forces had completely lost their fighting spirit and did not dare to fight at all. Their only thought was to run with all their might. As long as they could outrun their companions, they would have a chance of survival. Along the way, countless tragedies played out. In some narrow entrances, countless cavalrymen did not hesitate to kick their companions off their horses in order to pass quickly. Killing one's own people was nothing more than this. When they reached the outskirts of Yunnan County, half of the 20,000 remaining Allied soldiers were cut down. If not for the fact that Di Qing had led the remnants of the Central Army back to Yunnan County, the county would probably have fallen. Han Xian's attack was tantamount to pushing the Allied army to the end of the road. Luo Shixin led the cavalry division and circled the outskirts of the city. Seeing that they could not find a chance to attack the city, he led his troops back. The resentment in his heart had finally been vented. On top of the city walls, the Southern Alliance members looked at the retreating cavalry and heaved a sigh of relief, their faces pale white. They immediately passed down the order, ordering the Right Army to retreat to Yunnan County and take their time to think about everything. Yunnan County, Lord's residence. Gloomy, dead silence, absolute silence. A despairing and broken atmosphere filled the hall and did not dissipate for a long time, causing everyone to feel stifled. The Southern Alliance members, including the lords of the northern part of Zhaoqing County, truly experienced what it meant to fall from heaven to hell, what it meant to the higher you climb, the more painful it is to fall. Yesterday afternoon, they were still celebrating their epic victory, singing and dancing. When they woke up, they realized that the entire world had changed, and they were already in a hopeless situation. Thinking about the posts that they had instructed their subordinates to post on the forums, the various lords were extremely embarrassed. So embarrassing, so embarrassing. This time, the Southern Alliance had truly become famous in the China region. If it was said that the loss of the Middle Army was the breaking of the Allied Army's wings, then the loss of the Left Army was akin to dragging the Allied Army into the abyss of hell. In just a day's time, the 280,000 Allied Army was left with only 110,000. More than half of them had perished. Victory could cover up countless of ugly things. But once they failed, all of these ugly things would jump out even more. The first to make a move were the Southern Alliance members. Under Ruan Ping's orders, his trusted aides all stood out and publicly criticized the commander-in-chief, Di Qing. The loss of Song County was all because of the army's negligence. After the victory, the commander-in-chief let down their guard. The enemy had set up such a huge trap in the city, but the Middle Army did not notice it at all. They are to blame. That's right. At such a time, as the commander-in-chief, Di Qing must stand out and take responsibility. Agreed. He must be punished. The army lost. The commander-in-chief is useless. In a moment, the hall was filled with voices of condemning Di Qing. Only the heavens knew that just yesterday afternoon, at the same place, the same group of people were praising Di Qing to the heavens, saying that Di Qing was an unparalleled general that surpassed Bai Qi. In the blink of an eye, Di Qing had become the target of everyone's condemnation. Condemning Di Qing was not because of the wine, but because the spearhead was pointed at Buddha He, who was standing behind Di Qing. Ruan Ping wanted to use this opportunity to pull Buddha He down from his position as the alliance leader. Buddha He sat on the main seat, his face expressionless. The only movement he made was to use his eyes to stop Di Qing from speaking. He was extremely clear that at such a time, whatever he said would be wrong, so he might as well not say anything. Inside the alliance, there were Buddha He's trusted aides. If there was opposition, there would naturally be supporters. Who would have thought that the killing god Bai Qi would be so cold and heartless, to not care about the citizens of the city? So, the loss of Song County was purely accidental. The strategy that General Di Qing came up with was not a problem. The only problem was that ordinary people like us are unable to understand the thoughts of a killing god like Bai Qi. That's right. The loss of this battle is not the fault of the battle. How is it not guilty? At the very least, it is unavoidable for him to be guilty of negligence, right? In a moment, the entire hall was in a mess. The division of the alliance was close at hand. No matter what, after this defeat, Buddha He's reputation in the alliance had hit rock bottom. Seeing this, Ruan Ping did not continue to be overbearing. After all, his goal was to pull Buddha He down and not to push the entire alliance into the abyss of division. If that was the case, both sides would suffer, and it would be of no benefit to anyone. It had to be said that Ruan Ping, this young master of an aristocratic family, was a little stronger than Song One. His methods and knowledge were already extraordinary compared to ordinary people. If there was a chance, it was not impossible for this person to soar to the sky. To be continued. Chapter 472. Everyone. Ruan Ping stood up, attracting the attention of everyone in the hall. Many people thought that Ruan Ping was going to personally make things difficult for Buddha He. The atmosphere in the hall became more and more solemn. Everyone, Ruan Ping looked around and said, "Please listen to me. Now is not the time to hold anyone accountable. The most important thing is, what should the alliance do next?" As soon as he said that, the hall fell silent again. Everyone's mood instantly became heavy, and they no longer had the mood to argue. That's right, what should the alliance do? At this moment, there were only two choices. 1. Continue to increase the number of troops and fight to the death with Shanghai City. Although the alliance had suffered heavy losses, they still had a strong foundation, and there were still 110,000 soldiers left. In terms of numbers, they were still twice the number of Shanghai City's army. As long as they gritted their teeth, they could still fight. 2. Tuck their tails between their legs and retreat. The rear of the alliance was still stable for the time being. If they retreated now, Shanghai City's army would not be able to do anything to them. But if that happened, the Southern Alliance would not be able to raise their heads anymore. Apart from the issue of face, there was also the issue of strategy. Once the alliance retreated, Zhaoqing County would fall in an instant. And if they lost Zhaoqing County, the other counties in Lingnan Province would have to face the threat of Shanghai City's army. Therefore, in the long run, retreating now was definitely not a good idea. Unexpectedly, most of the lords chose to retreat. These lords were truly stunned by Bai Qi and Han Xion's words, and they were completely scared out of their wits. All they saw was the real threat in front of them. As for long-term plans, there was still plenty of time. Who knew what would happen in the future? Typical ostrich mentality. Everyone, the longer the war drags on, the more advantageous it will be for Shanghai City. They will have enough time to transfer troops from other places to surround and destroy us. By that time, it will be too late to retreat. Instead of that, it would be better for us to cut our losses and retreat as soon as possible. Now that our morale is low, it would be better for us to retreat temporarily and wait for an opportunity to fight Shanghai City after we recover. The current strategic retreat was for the sake of dealing an even fiercer blow to Shanghai City in the future. No matter what, we've taken down Gray City and forced the killing god Bai Qi to retreat. This is already a very impressive achievement. Well said. Ruan Ping's words won the crowd's approval. One had to admit that this person's eloquence was truly impressive. According to Ruan Ping, the allies didn't seem to have lost the battle. Instead, they seemed to have won. Although Ruan Ping hated Ouyang Shua to the point of gnashing his teeth, he was one of the core members who advocated for the evacuation. He had his own plans. Although they lost this battle, it wasn't a bad thing for the alliance. After this battle, it was enough for the alliance members to realize how terrifying and threatening Shanghai City was. When they returned to the territory, the first thing they would do would definitely be to strengthen their armaments. Apart from that, they had to stick together. Under the strong pressure of Shanghai City, not only would this Southern Alliance not disband, but it would also become even tighter and develop even closer cooperation. For example, the city-state system that Buddha he had previously planned would be realized. As such, to Ruan Ping, it was a chance to rise up. In the alliance, Buddha he's prestige had already hit rock bottom, and Ruan Ping naturally became the most advantageous candidate to become the next alliance leader. If he could lead the alliance and successfully form a city-state system, then Ruan Ping's position would be like the sun in the sky. Not only in the Lingnan province, but in the entire China region, he would have a place to stand. More importantly, only then would Ruan Ping have the capital to fight against Ouyang Shua. Thus, Ruan Ping was the most determined to retreat. With Ruan Ping's encouragement, even some of the neutral factions chose to retreat. Of course, there were also those who chose to defend, such as Buddha he, because his territory had long fallen, and he could not return. Conquering the southern part of Zhaoqing province was Buddha he's only hope. The moment his territory was conquered, Buddha he had no way of retreat. Unfortunately, Buddha he's words carried little weight. As time passed, all parties argued endlessly, and those who advocated for retreat had the absolute advantage. Ruan Ping was preparing to enjoy the fruits of victory and look forward to the future, but he was awakened by a loud shout. "You can't retreat." This shout was loud and clear and immediately attracted everyone's attention. Following the direction of the voice, the one who spoke was the Zhaoqing province lord's camp that had been silent all this while. Southern Alliance wanted to retreat, but the lords of the northern part of Zhaoqing province naturally did not agree. If the Southern Alliance left, they would have to face the Shanghai City Army alone. "Brother, you don't seem to understand the situation, right?" Hearing this, a Southern Alliance member stood out and said in a mocking tone, "At the end of the day, our Southern Alliance expedition to Zhaoqing province is only for humanitarian assistance. What can the Lord of Zhaoqing province order us around? If we want to retreat, we will. Who cares about you? That's right. We are only here to help. Okay." This Southern Alliance member's attitude was bad and spoke without thinking, instantly angering the Lord of Zhaoqing province. The honeymoon period of both parties seemed to be coming to an end. "Stupid teammates." Ruan Ping heard this and shook his head. "If you want to retreat, then retreat. Is there a need to pour salt on their wounds? So stupid." The Lord of Zhaoqing province who spoke just now stood out again and said in a mocking tone, "I think you guys are the ones who do not understand the situation. If you want to retreat, we naturally cannot stop you. There is only one rule. Our territory's teleportation formation is only for friends. Those who are not friends, better walk back by yourselves." The Southern Alliance members suddenly became silent. They then remembered that the teleportation formation was still in the hands of the Lord of the northern part of Zhaoqing province. If they did not agree, this Southern Alliance would not be able to use the teleportation formation. This time, they had lost a lot of face. He Fu sat at the seat of honor and coldly watched the performance below. A bunch of idiots. Great. They had shed all pretense of cordiality and still did not gain anything. This time, even if the Southern Alliance wanted to retreat, they would not be able to do so. "Brother, everything can be discussed. I apologize on behalf of my companion just now." Seeing this, Ruan Ping could only try to smooth things over. Unfortunately, the Lord of Zhaoqing province did not buy it. The entire discussion was in a deadlock. No one was able to convince the other. Luckily, the Shanghai City Army did not make any further moves, and both sides were in a deadlock. In the end, the ones who broke the deadlock were the Praetorian Guards. August 24th, Tianchuan County. Lin Yi led the disguised Praetorian Guards and finally arrived at the outskirts of Tianchuan County. Under Lin Yi's signal, a quick-witted soldier went up and shouted to the guards on the city wall, "Open the gates! Quickly open the gates! Who are you people?" The ones in charge of guarding Tianchuan County were naturally the 30,000-strong army of the Alliance. As the logistics center of the Alliance, the defense of the entire Tianchuan County was extremely tight. Even in the day, the gates were tightly shut. Only a small door was left at the side, as an entrance for the transportation of rations. Even this small door was completely shut before the Praetorian Guard arrived. "You dogs are blind. We are General Chu Yi's army." The soldier Lin Yi chose was truly an award-winning actor. His acting was perfect, and his attitude was extremely arrogant. The guards at the gates were not completely clueless about Chu Yi's army. Just by looking at the different armors of the cavalry below, they already believed half of it. The entire northern part of Zhaoqing County was a cavalry unit, Chu Yi's army. Even so, the guards at the gates did not let their guard down and asked as usual, "So you are General Chu Yi's army? May I know what brings you here?" "The camp is running low on rations, so the general sent us here to deliver them." This was the reason that Ouyang Shuo and Lin Yi had discussed long ago. The logistics of Chu Yi's army was indeed handled by Tianchuan County, and there was no loophole. "Do you have a token?" "Of course, we brought the general's seal." "Bring it up." As they spoke, a basket was lowered from the top of the city wall. The soldier walked up and put the seal they found on Chu Yi's body into the basket. The guards at the gates received the seal and confirmed that there was no mistake. They would never have thought that Chu Yi's army had been completely wiped out, and even the seal had fallen into the hands of the thieves. At this time, the guards had no reason to stop them. Since you are General Chu Yi's army, according to the rules, the number of people entering the city cannot exceed 500. The rest of you can set up camp outside the city. The guards at the gates were really competent. T. We were ordered by the general to ride at top speed, and the horses were tired. We thought that we could rest in the city after arriving at Tianchuan County. How dare you make us camp outside the city? Did you eat a leopard's gall? I will report to my general when I go back. The guards at the gates were in a difficult position. Why do you want us to starve? Let us in. Under Lin Yi's hint, the Praetorian guards burst out in dissatisfaction. The guards at the gates wiped the sweat off their forehead, not daring to provoke these guys. After weighing the pros and cons, they decided to let them in. After all, they were allies and it was not against the rules. After a while, the drawbridge of the moat was lowered and the gates opened. Just like that, Lin Yi led the Praetorian guards into the city. What happened next was self-evident. After entering the city, the Praetorian guards suddenly attacked and took control of the gates. Their second target was the relay station in the city, in case the news of Tianchuan County's attack spread out. What followed next was a feast of slaughter. Facing the sudden attack, the 30,000 soldiers of Tianchuan County were completely unprepared. In less than 3 hours, the Praetorian guards had completely taken control of Tianchuan County. The 30,000 soldiers were either killed or captured. After half a month, Tianchuan County was once again in the hands of Shanghai City. To be continued. Chapter 473. The regaining of Tianchuan County marked the end of the battle for Zhaoqing. On the same day that Tianchuan County was conquered, Lin Yi led the 1st and 2nd Brigade and continued south. On the 25th of August, the 2nd and 4th Divisions of the Zhejiang Army suddenly appeared from the east and west, cutting off the retreat route of the alliance. The Allied forces, who were still arguing with each other, were completely dumbfounded by Shanghai City's actions. On the 26th of August, Zhang Han led a temporary division and met up with Bai Qi. Bai Qi immediately gave the order for the army to move forward and surround Yunnan County. In the following days, the alliance tried to break out of the encirclement several times, but to no avail. On the 27th of August, Lin Yi led his troops and officially met up with the 2 divisions of the Zhejiang Army. The retreat route of the alliance was completely blocked. On the 29th of August, Sun Bin led the 2nd and 4th Divisions of the Tiger Army and finally reached Zhaoqing's battlefield a day earlier. With that, the entire Zhaoqing County was now filled with the Forbidden Guards, 2 divisions of the Zhejiang Army, 2 divisions of the Tiger Army, 1 division of the Leopard Army, 1 division of the Garrison Army, and 1 temporary division. There were a total of 8 divisions, with a total of 110,000 men. 110,000 men were trapped in Yunnan County, without reinforcements or food supplies. Surrender was the only option for the alliance. The members of the Southern Alliance were stubborn and refused to surrender no matter what. Ouyang Shuo received the news from the front line and immediately gave the order for the Forbidden Guards to cooperate with Luo Shixin's division to sweep through the northern part of Zhaoqing County, leaving no survivors. At this time, the northern part of Zhaoqing County was only left with a few remaining soldiers, nothing to worry about. In less than a week, the northern part of Zhaoqing County was completely pacified. The lords of Zhaoqing County were all teleported to Quanzhou by Gaia. On the 5th of September, Xiao He led a group of officials and teleported to Wulong County to take over Zhaoqing County. The last hope of reinforcements was gone, and the Southern Alliance was in despair. Ruan Ping and the others knew that there was no hope of escaping and did not want to be captured, so they all committed suicide in the city and returned to their territories to reincarnate. The moment they returned, dozens of members of the Southern Alliance announced that they would expand their army by 10,000 to deal with the future threat of Shanghai City. Ruan Ping also officially replaced Buddha He and ascended the throne of the Southern Alliance. On the 10th day of the 9th month, He Fo, the only son of the feudal lords, led his troops out of the city and surrendered. The famous General Di Qing and 100,000 allied soldiers surrendered together with Buddha He. At this point, the Battle of Zhaoqing, which had lasted for 1.5 months, officially came to an end. With the end of the campaign, Gaia's blockade of the channels and forums was officially lifted. Gossip about the Battle of Zhaoqing instantly filled the forums. Everyone knew that Shanghai City had won another crucial victory. September 14th, Wulong County. Bai Qi, Han Xian, and the other generals abandoned their troops and rushed to Wulong County to see the marquee. Song Wen, Buddha He, and Di Qing also arrived with Bai Qi and the other generals. Ouyang Shua held a military conference in Wulong County. Besides the generals, Xiao He and the 4 bureau chiefs of the protectorate were also present. In this battle, except for the Tianchuan County Regiment, whose designation was revoked, the other regiments also suffered losses. The total number of casualties exceeded 20,000. Of course, the number of captured soldiers was also astronomical. In the battle of the southern part of Zhaoqing County, more than 40,000 soldiers were captured. Zhang Han had already reorganized them into a temporary regiment. Outside Wulong County, more than 35,000 soldiers of the Chu Yi army were captured. Outside Gunlo County, more than 40,000 soldiers of the Left Army were captured. Inside Tianchuan County, more than 20,000 soldiers of the Tianchuan County were captured. In Yunnan County, more than 100,000 soldiers of the Tianchuan County surrendered. The number of prisoners of war that needed to be reorganized was close to 200,000, which was more than the total number of soldiers of Shanghai City. Reorganizing such a large army was a big problem. In the Battle of Zhaoqing, the weakness of Shanghai City's insufficient army was undoubtedly exposed. Therefore, Ouyang Shua was determined to carry out a large-scale expansion of the army this time. Although reorganizing the army was the responsibility of the military bureau, everyone knew that the framework of reorganizing the army was decided by the Marquis alone. Even Du Ruhui would not say a word at this time. When he surrendered, Ouyang Shua was already planning the reorganization of the army. In this military conference, Ouyang Shua officially revealed his reorganization plan. First, the designation of the Tianchuan County City Guard Regiment was officially revoked, and the remaining 2,000 soldiers were to be reorganized. Naturally, Song Wu's position as the regiment commander would also be removed. The Song clan's mark on the Tianchuan County City Guard Regiment was simply too deep. Many of the officers in the army were descendants of the Song clan. Even though the Song clan was related to Ouyang Shua by marriage, they were not tolerated by Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua could make use of this opportunity to get rid of this hidden danger. This was the time when the Song clan needed to rely on Ouyang Shua the most. Even if they were dissatisfied, they wouldn't dare to say anything. This was the best opportunity. Once the Song clan regained their composure, Ouyang Shua wouldn't be able to deal a heavy blow to them. Second, replenish the 12,000 soldiers that the various divisions had lost. In order to make up for the losses of the various divisions, Ouyang Shua set down a rule that in future battles, the various divisions would be given priority, and the elite soldiers would be given priority to them. After the various divisions had replenished their losses, the remaining prisoners of war would be reorganized. In other words, the most elite prisoners of war would be added to the various divisions. This way, the combat strength of the various divisions wouldn't be significantly reduced because of the losses. Third, establish the garrison division. Apart from the Zhaoqing County Police Division and the Lianzhou County Police Division, Ouyang Shua had also formed 2 additional police divisions. One of the garrison divisions would be added to the Shanghai City Guard Regiment. As the center of the territory, Shanghai City seemed a little weak with only 1 city guard regiment. This made Ouyang Shua feel somewhat constrained when he mobilized the Imperial Guard Regiment. Therefore, Ouyang Shua made use of this opportunity to expand the City Guard Regiment into 2 divisions. In this way, even if the Imperial Guard Regiment wasn't in Shanghai City, there wouldn't be any worries in the headquarters. In the future, Ouyang Shua's goal was to upgrade the City Guard Regiment into a City Guard Regiment, which would be able to suppress the other 4 divisions. Currently, there were 2 divisions that he didn't have to worry about for the time being. If he expanded the garrison division in one go, he would have sufficient soldiers. However, Shanghai City's finances might not be able to bear the burden. Although Shanghai City was becoming more prosperous, its financial income was also very impressive. But overall, it was still in a stage of rapid development and needed to be continuously invested. Ouyang Shua didn't want to drain the pond and cause too much of a burden on Shanghai City's military expenses. The other garrison division was prepared for Jade Buddha County. Jade Buddha County was a nail that Ouyang Shua had planted in Jiaozhou County. In order to protect this nail and prevent it from being removed by the Southern Alliance, it naturally needed to be heavily guarded. The commanders of the 4 guard regiments were also selected one by one. The Lianzhou County Garrison Division commander was Hu Yibiao, who had already been selected. The commander of the Zhaoqing Prefecture Guard Division was the young general, Su Wang. As for the remaining 2 garrison division commanders, Ouyang Shua left it to the military office to decide. No matter what, Ouyang Shua still had to respect Du Ruhui, the head of the military office, and give her limited authority to appoint and dismiss generals. Otherwise, in the long run, Du Ruhui's days would not be easy. Using this opportunity, Ouyang Shua also arranged Song Wu's duties. Song Wu was appointed as the deputy commander of Liizhou County Garrison Division by Ouyang Shua, which was equivalent to dropping half a rank. If Song Wu performed well in the future, it was not impossible for Ouyang Shua to promote him to regiment commander. In this battle, the performance of the Liizhou County Garrison Division was acknowledged by Bai Qi. Regiment commander Zhao Yin naturally returned to Ouyang Shua's site. At the right time, Ouyang Shua was prepared to reassign Zhao Yin back to the field army. The 4th was to expand the Tao Leopard Corps. Ouyang Shua wanted to reorganize the Tao Leopard Corps in one go. Zhang Han replaced Wei Zhang as the regiment commander of the Tao Leopard Corps' 1st Regiment. Wei Zhang took over Zhang Han's temporary regiment commander, and its designation was set as the Tao Leopard Corps' 2nd Regiment. In the army, the 1st to 4th regiments seemed to be of the same rank, but in reality, there were still some differences. The higher the rank, the higher the position. The regiment commander of the 1st Regiment was the strongest contender for the future regiment commander position. Whether it was Shi Wansui of the Dragon Elephant Corps or Fan Lihua of the Tiger Corps, they were all the same. Zhang Han became the 3rd person. After all, with Zhang Han's ability, it was more than enough for him to become a regiment commander. At the right time, Zhang Han would be promoted once more. Other than that, he would reorganize 2 more regiments from the prisoners of war and give them the designation of Tao Leopard Corps' 3rd Regiment and 4th Regiment. The surrendered General Di Qing took the position of Tao Leopard Corps' 3rd Regiment's commander. Di Qing's ability had already shown off in the Battle of Zhaoqing. Compared to Wei Zhang, he was naturally superior. However, he was a new surrendered general, so he could only be under Wei Zhang. Under Luo Shixin's tent, there were 2 young generals, Xiao Bu and Sun Quanlin. Both of them were first-rate cavalry generals. In this battle, their performance could be said to be outstanding. Sun Quanlin was a general who specialized in cavalry and archery. He was brave and steady in battle. Ouyang Shua took a liking to him and promoted him to be the Tao Leopard Corps' 4th Regiment's commander. After Lin Yi, this was the 2nd Shanghai City Field Division commander that had been nurtured by Shanghai City. Coincidentally, both Lin Yi and Sun Quanlin were previously under Luo Shixin's tent. Together with Xiao Bu and Sun Tingjiao, they were the 4 generals from before. Luo Shixin's regiment was the territory's 1st Cavalry Regiment. It was the 1st regiment to pass the regiment commander's test, and its status was second only to the Imperial Guard Regiment. The 2 cavalry regiments could be said to be the territory's 2 walls. Luo Shixin, the young general, was also gaining Ouyang Shua's recognition. Luo Shixin's potential hadn't been used up yet. There was still the possibility of him improving further. Ouyang Shua looked forward to the day Luo Shixin became an imperial general. To be continued. Chapter 474. The effect of the 100 family Holy Lands on NPCs was slowly becoming apparent in the army. Sun Xuanlin, Xiao Bu, Sun Tangjiao, Zhao Yin, Liao Kai, and the other local generals had all broken through the barrier to become high-ranking military generals. In the near future, Shanghai City would welcome a large number of local high-ranking military generals. The position of division commander no longer needed to be held by historical generals. For the future expansion of Shanghai City's army, the most difficult problem of high-ranking military generals had been solved. Other than that, with the operation of the Army's Marshall Hall, when the first batch of students graduated, there would be a large number of professional officers, including logistics officers, secretaries, staff officers, etc., who would join the various divisions. In the future, every division will be able to fight independently. Replenishing soldiers, expanding the garrison division, reorganizing the Leopard Tau army. In the entire process, only 100,000 prisoners of war were used up, leaving close to 100,000 prisoners of war waiting to be reorganized. Out of the 100,000 prisoners of war, after deducting the injured and unqualified soldiers, as well as the city defense forces prepared for Zhaoqing County, there were roughly 65,000 people left, enough to form another army. Ouyang Shua did not choose to reorganize a new legion. Instead, he decided to expand the existing 3 legions. The current army was formed by 4 divisions. Each division had 13,500 men, for a total of 54,000 men. The army's position was to be able to fight a large war independently. But according to the current development of the war, 50,000 men was no longer enough to control the situation. One Southern Alliance could easily gather a 200,000-man army. Thus, it was necessary to expand the army. Ouyang Shua decided to expand the army from 4 divisions to 5 divisions, which was in line with Shanghai City's standard of 5 divisions. Then, he would equip each army with a direct brigade. Thus, the army's strength would increase from 54,000 to 70,000, an increase of 16,000 men. An army of 70,000 elites was enough to deal with an area war. To complete the expansion of the 3 armies, they would need 48,000 men, which was equivalent to an entire army. After the army's expansion, he needed to appoint 3 division commanders. Ouyang Shua's principle was to promote as many generals as possible from the battlefield. Therefore, Xiao Bu and Sun Tangjiao, the 2 cavalry generals, became the commanders of the 5th Division of the Dragonxiang Legion and the Tiger Ben Legion, respectively. As for the commander of the Leopard Tau Corps' 5th Division, one of the generals was promoted from the fallen generals. In this battle, out of the 200,000 surrendered soldiers, only Di Qing was promoted. Such an obvious difference in treatment would inevitably make the surrendered army bitterly disappointed. After weighing the pros and cons, Ouyang Shua decided to promote another surrendered general. The specific candidates will be chosen by Du Ruhui. After this reorganization, Shanghai City gained 4 guard divisions and 6 field combat divisions, resulting in an army of over 130,000 soldiers, which was close to the total number of soldiers it had in the past. The field army consisted of 3 main battle legions with a total of 210,000 soldiers. Apart from them, there was also Ouyang Shua's personal army, the 3,000 Divine Guards, and the Imperial Guard Division. As for the remaining 17,000 captives, Ouyang Shua transferred them to work as bailiffs. That's right, a yamen runner. To raise the status of the Internal Affairs Bureau, apart from giving it the power to investigate cases, the second step was to equip it with a strong team of bailiffs. The bailiffs of the Public Order Bureau were equivalent to the modern police force, maintaining law and order, arresting bandits, fighting crime, and other duties were all handed over to the Public Order Bureau. Thus, it was necessary to establish a strong team of bailiffs. With enough bailiffs, the Public Order Bureau could further loosen the shackles on the local defense forces, allowing them to specialize in military operations and not neglect their armaments. Ouyang Shua's requirement for the local defense forces was to be able to enter the battlefield at any time. At this point, Ouyang Shua could be said to have made full use of the 200,000 captives. The reason why he didn't demobilize them like he did in the Battle of Lijiao, apart from the objective need to expand the army, was that the overall quality of this batch of captives was higher. The 200,000 captives were basically all Allied forces. For this battle, the Allied forces had mobilized the elites of the territory, and their overall quality was excellent. Thus, Ouyang Shuo didn't want to waste them. After all, if he relied on recruiting soldiers, training them, and letting them experience the baptism of the battlefield, it would take at least 3 months, if not longer. Reorganizing the captives was a shortcut. After the battle, not only did the Shanghai City Army not weaken, but their strength had increased greatly. Thinking about this, Ouyang Shuo really had to thank this Southern Alliance for their wealth. After confirming the plan, the following reorganization would naturally be carried out by the military office, with the cooperation of the various generals. This reorganization involved hundreds of thousands of soldiers, spanning across all the major armies. Conservatively speaking, it would take at least a month to complete the initial reorganization. The military office already had a complete set of procedures for the reorganization of the army. The first step was to get rid of the injured and unqualified soldiers. These retired soldiers would be handed over to the Internal Affairs Bureau, and they would be in charge of arranging their jobs. These soldiers were good labor, and the various places would fight for them. Considering the population of Shanghai City, Ouyang Shuo instructed the Civil Affairs Bureau to arrange for these captives to work in Shanghai City, increasing the population of Shanghai City. Ouyang Shuo also wanted to let Shanghai City reach the population limit and quickly rise to a second-rank county city. The second step was to register the remaining captives and issue their military status. Once the military status was set, it could not be changed, and they would officially integrate into the Shanghai City Army system and would no longer be discriminated against and could even enjoy the benefits of the territory. Of course, if they escaped, they would be wanted by the entire territory. Registering 200,000 people, recording their military types, specialties, and other basic information was truly a huge task. With just the military office, it was impossible to complete. With no other choice, Duru Hui could only borrow people. The first choice was naturally the officials from the Civil Affairs Bureau, as that was their specialty. Other than that, Duru Hui also went to the Army's Marshall Hall and selected a batch of students to assist the military office. It could be considered as giving these students a chance to practice and let them come into close contact with the Army. The process of registration was also the process of selecting talents. Shanghai City had expanded by 10 divisions, and they needed 50 brigade marshals and 250 battalion commanders. This batch of middle-ranking generals were selected from the veterans of Shanghai City, and the rest were selected from the surrendered generals. After all, there were still many outstanding generals among the surrendered generals, and Ouyang Shuo could not ignore them. Before the war, they were all serving their respective masters. Now that they were a family, as the parent, Ouyang Shuo naturally had to do his best to treat everyone equally. Of course, in the key positions, Ouyang Shuo still had to place the generals that he trusted. The direct subordinates he promoted would infiltrate the various divisions through the reorganization of the army. Other than that, Ouyang Shuo also selected a batch of officers from the Divine Martial Guards and the Imperial Guard Division and sent them to the various divisions to serve as battalion commanders or brigade marshals. Whether it was the Divine Martial Guards or the Imperial Guard Division, they were all Ouyang Shuo's direct subordinates. The soldiers in the army were loyal to Ouyang Shuo, and they were dead set on him. The transfer of these officers was beneficial to Ouyang Shuo's control over the army. Ouyang Shuo had never relaxed his control over the army. This was the foundation of his life. It could also effectively prevent the generals in the army from becoming arrogant and ambitious. He had always believed that it was normal for people to have ambition. As a superior, what Ouyang Shuo needed to do was to press this ambition in a cage from the beginning and not let it have a chance to jump out. Ouyang Shuo spent a huge amount of money to support the professional army because of this consideration. The generals didn't have the power to recruit soldiers, and they also didn't have the power to appoint and dismiss generals. Everything was in the hands of the military office, which was also in the hands of Ouyang Shua. Other than that, the salary of the soldiers in the army was uniform and transparent. The generals couldn't embezzle the salary. Once they did, the soldiers would find out and report it to the military law office. In this way, if any general dared to rebel, as long as Ouyang Shua gave the order would be directly passed down to the brigade level. That general wouldn't be able to command the troops under him, and could only obediently wait to be arrested. It was through these kinds of restrictions that Ouyang Shua could rest assured and let the generals fight independently. Due to his status, the times when he personally led troops to war had become fewer and fewer. Even if Ouyang Shua wanted to go to war, the important officials of the territory would also stop him. Of course, after the reorganization of the army, Ouyang Shua still had to go to the various divisions to inspect them one by one, to show his face, and to comfort the soldiers in the army, to show his existence. This was called imperceptible influence. The third step of the reorganization was to gather troops for the various divisions. Generally speaking, the commanders of the divisions could personally select soldiers according to the requirements of the various divisions, accompanied by officials of the military office. After all, different types of troops naturally had different requirements for soldiers. Cavalry, saber and shield soldiers, spear soldiers, archers, crossbowmen, and so on, all had to be matched. After the various divisions finished selecting, they had to report to the military office and apply for the corresponding weapons, equipment, war horses, and other military supplies. After all, after the reorganization, the equipment had to be allocated according to the standard of Shanghai City. This was also the biggest expense of the reorganization of the army. The fourth and last step of the reorganization was that the generals couldn't participate in it. According to the unified arrangement of the Marquis, the military office would carry out systematic reorganization of the remaining soldiers and hand them over to the various divisions as a unit. During this process, the commanders of the divisions, including the commanders of the armies, couldn't interfere. After the reorganization was completed, the military office would order the various armies to go to the designated location to receive the troops. In this way, the interference of the generals in the reorganization of the army and the appointment and removal of personnel would be minimized. Of course, it wasn't that Bai Qi and the others couldn't do anything. As generals, they could ask for merits for their subordinates and recommend outstanding generals. To be continued. Chapter 475. After the announcement of the army reorganization plan, the next step was to reward the soldiers according to their contributions. Wei Zhang was conferred the title of General Yang Lai, and the other generals, including the soldiers who had fought well, were all rewarded. Of course, all the rewards were carried out according to the military merit system and military rank system formulated by the military office. After a month of hard work, Du Ruhui led the military office and finally formulated the territory's military merit system and military rank system, which were approved by Ouyang Shua. The reward according to the merit system was based on the mountain and sea territory's military merit reward system. According to the established rules, the territory's military merit rewards were roughly divided into 3 categories. First, rewards of property. This was the most common type of reward. Gold, silver, jewelry, silk satin, armor, elite war horses, elite weapons, cultivation techniques, and so on were all among the rewards. Among them, monetary rewards were the most common. In the system, there were clear rules on how much one would be rewarded according to how much one's contributions were. From generals to ordinary soldiers, everyone was among the list of rewards. Of course, the targets of the rewards were limited to those who performed well. In other words, the rewards in the army would not be on a large scale. Only the bravest in battle, those who killed the most enemies, and those who made extraordinary contributions were qualified to be rewarded. Only in this way could the morale of the army be boosted and play the role of motivation. Second, promotion of military rank. According to the Mountain and Sea Territory's military rank system, the territory's military ranks were divided into general, lieutenant, sergeant, and soldier. There were a total of 5 ranks and 18 ranks. General was divided into 5 ranks, with the first being the highest and the 5th the lowest. Each rank of general had a specific title, and it was unique. Lieutenant was divided into 3 ranks, namely high-rank lieutenant, middle-rank lieutenant, and low-rank lieutenant. Lieutenant and sergeant were both 3rd rank, namely captain, 1st lieutenant, and 2nd lieutenant, and staff sergeant, sergeant, and corporal. The lowest rank of soldier was 4th rank, namely 1st class soldier, 1st rank soldier, 2nd rank soldier, and private soldier. Military rank was linked to one's position. The rank of general was only granted to division commanders and above. The rank of lieutenant corresponded to the rank of brigade commander. The rank of lieutenant corresponded to the rank of battalion commander. The rank of sergeant corresponded to the rank of squad commander, and the rank of soldier corresponded to the rank of squad commander. In addition, the rank of private was only granted to non-officers. When all the recruits of each division became regular soldiers, and the soldiers reached the rank of rank 5, they would automatically be granted the rank of private. Soldiers below the 5th rank were called recruits and had no military ranks. Based on this alone, one could see Shanghai City's elite strategy. According to this standard, the meaning was very clear. Those below the 5th level were all rookies. They didn't even have the qualifications to enter the battlefield. If it was in other territories, a rank 5 soldier would be considered an elite soldier. Every military officer would have a basic military rank after taking up their post. For example, when a soldier was promoted to a squad leader, he would automatically be promoted to a second-rate soldier. After rendering meritorious service, they could be promoted to first-class soldier and then first-class soldier. Of course, private first class was the highest he could go. Only when he was promoted to captain again could he be given the rank of corporal. So on and so forth. When the division commanders assumed their posts, they would automatically receive the rank of a 5th-rank general. Military rank marked the relationship between superiors and subordinates in the military. Junior officers had to obey their superiors unconditionally. This was an iron law in the army. In this way, there would be no confusion in command during the war. Take a battalion, for example. If a battalion commander died in battle, according to convention, there would be no one to replace him. The platoon commander would not have the authority to command, and the entire platoon would immediately become a plate of loose sand. With a military rank, the situation would be very different. Once a battalion commander died in battle, according to military rules, the person with the highest military rank in the battalion would automatically take over as the temporary commander. If the replacement was also killed in battle, the person with the highest military rank among the survivors would take over. In this manner, the team would be able to continue fighting until they were completely defeated. This alone was better than thousands of troops. No territorial characteristics could compare to a perfect system. In addition to marking the relationship between superiors and subordinates, military rank was also closely related to military pay. Taking this opportunity, Du Ruhui also made a change to the military pay system in the territory. In the future, military pay would only be linked to military rank and not to the rank and position of a soldier. For example, before, the monthly pay for squad leaders was a uniform 1 gold coin. After the change, it was changed to a first-class squad leader's pay of 1 gold coin, a first-rate squad leader's pay of 80 silver coins, and a second-rate squad leader's pay of 60 silver coins. In other words, a high-rank military rank corresponded to the previous standard military pay. In this way, the expenditure of officers' pay was imperceptibly reduced. It should be noted that the officers accounted for about 30% of the military pay. However, the officers couldn't say anything about it. In the army, martial arts were respected. If a second-rate squad leader felt that his pay was too low, he could just fight hard and be promoted to a first-class soldier. In this way, it would instead stimulate the soldier's desire to make contributions. Du Ruhui's move could be said to be a stroke of genius. Not only did she trick people, but she also made them speechless. Correspondingly, the standard of military pay for all levels of military rank was unified. The basic principle was to use 08 as the benchmark. It meant that in the same rank, the soldiers of the lower rank would only be paid 80% of the soldiers of the higher rank. The salary of a sergeant was 5 gold coins, a sergeant was 4 gold coins, and a corporal was 3 gold coins. The salary of a captain was 20 gold coins, a lieutenant was 15 gold coins, and a junior was 12 gold coins. The salary of a high-rank brigade commander was 50 gold coins, a middle-rank brigade commander was 40 gold coins, and a low-rank brigade commander was 30 gold coins. The military rank of a general was different. According to the rules, the general received an annual salary, which was received once a year. The annual salary of a 5th-rank general was 1,000 gold coins, a 4th-rank general was 2,000 gold coins, a 3rd-rank general was 3,000 gold coins, a 2nd-rank general was 4,000 gold coins, and a 1st-rank general was 5,000 gold coins. In addition to the annual salary, the general also enjoyed other special treatment. According to the rules, every general was given a general's residence in Shanghai City. The standard of a general's residence was different according to the rank of the general. For example, Lin Yi, who was a 5th-rank general, was given a general's residence. Bai Qi, who was a 1st-rank general, was given a general's residence. Ouyang Shua's arrangement was also in the hope that the generals under his command would be able to enjoy the warmth of home in addition to leading troops to war. When they returned to Shanghai City, they would also have a place to stay. According to Gai's arrangement, the families of historical figures would automatically appear in the wilderness after the dynasty entered the wilderness, so they could be found. For example, Bai Qi's wife. Similarly, the families of Sun Bin, Eli, Zhang Han, Wei Zhang, and the other generals also came to Shanghai City. In the military rank system, in addition to the treatment of generals, there were also different rules for privates and even new recruits. Similarly, because of the reduction in military rank, the soldiers' pay was naturally reduced as well. Recruits from rank 1 to rank 4 were paid 20 silver coins. Private soldiers of rank 9 and below were paid 40 silver coins. Elite soldiers of rank 10 to rank 12 were paid 60 silver coins, which was the same as a second-rate squad leader. Du Ruhui was also very ruthless. With this reform alone, she reduced the military expenditure by more than 10%. Previously, the average soldier's rank was 4, and a battalion's pay was 275 gold coins. But after the reform, the military's pay was directly reduced to 237 gold coins, and so on and so forth. A division's pay was directly reduced from 8,250 gold coins to 7,200 gold coins. A full division's pay was around 36,000 gold coins. The monthly salary of 3 full-strength legions was roughly around 110,000 gold coins. In order to reduce the military expenditure, Du Ruhui had gone all out this time. At the same time, the military administration had also made clear regulations on the local garrison troops' pay. The garrison troops' pay was the same as the field armies, and their pay was calculated at 80% of the latter's. The City Guard Division, as the capital's garrison troops, had their pay according to the field army standard. With a military rank, there were naturally corresponding medals. According to Ouyang Shua's instructions, the medals were based on the dragon and the totem. Generals all wore the golden dragon badge. What differentiated the rank of a general was the number of golden dragons spitting out pearls. A rank 5 general only had 1 dragon pearl. A rank 4 general had 2 dragon pearls. And so on and so forth. A rank 1 great general had 5 dragon pearls. And so on and so forth. A rank 1 great general had 5 dragon pearls. Ouyang Shua, as the commander-in-chief of the army, also wore the golden dragon badge when he wore his military uniform. The difference was that his golden dragon was a 9-clawed golden dragon, and the dragon pearl it spat out was also an incomparably large golden dragon pearl. The 9-clawed golden dragon had 5 first and 4 last. The general's dragon pearl was a white dragon pearl. The golden dragon only had 7 claws, 4 first and 3 last. Lieutenant, and sergeant corresponded to the silver dragon badge, iron dragon badge, and bronze dragon badge respectively. High, middle, and low ranks corresponded to 3 dragon pearls, 2 dragon pearls, and 1 dragon pearl. Each dragon badge's material corresponded to its title. For example, the golden dragon badge was made of gold. As for the lowest rank of soldiers, they did not have the right to wear the dragon badge. Their medals were also made of bronze, and the symbol was a cross between a tang saber and a heavy sword. What differentiated the ranks was a bar. Private soldiers had 1 bar, second-class soldiers had 2 bars, and so on and so forth. First-class soldiers had 4 bars. There was no doubt that the establishment and implementation of the military ranks symbolized that the Shanghai city's army had taken another solid step on the road towards professionalization. One of the major tasks of the Army's reorganization, this time, was to confer titles to all the officers and soldiers. According to the arrangement of the military office, the conferment ceremony would be held immediately after the Army's reorganization was completed. At that time, Ouyang Shuo would personally preside over the conferment ceremony. The last type of conferment for military merits was the conferment of nobility. Needless to say, in ancient times, the conferment of nobility was even more important than the military rank. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the greatest reward. As long as one obtained a noble title, it would be enough to bring honor to one's ancestors. Unfortunately, regardless of whether Ouyang Shuo was the Marquis of Lian Province or the governor of Southern Border, he did not have the authority to confer nobility to his subordinates or generals. Only the ruler of a country could confer a noble title. Therefore, the third type of conferment could only stay in the files drawn up by the military office for the time being and could not be carried out. Only after the country was established could a noble title be conferred. Du Ruhui listed it out to give the officers and soldiers something to think about. To be continued. Chapter 476. P.S. Book Group 5715425584. There is a map in the group. Welcome to join the group to complain. The military merit system and the military rank system formulated by the military office were also applicable to the Navy. It was just that the base color of the military rank insignia was different for different troops. The Navy epaulets were blue, symbolizing the endless sea. The cavalry unit used red as the base, symbolizing the fiery passion. The infantry used khaki silk, symbolizing indestructibility and as thick as earth. The 3 major troops each had their own meaning. In addition to the subdivision of military rank and pay, the military office also had detailed regulations for the ranks of military merit. The entire military merit system was divided into 3 ranks and 9 ranks, with the first rank being the highest and the 9th the lowest. The 1st to the 3rd ranks were the upper ranks, the 4th to the 6th ranks were the middle ranks, the 7th to the 9th ranks were the lower ranks. Different ranks meant different rewards. Upper rank military merit was conferred the title of nobility. Middle rank military merit was promoted to military rank. Lower rank military merit was rewarded with property. The evaluation criteria for the rank of military merit was mainly based on the number of enemies killed on the battlefield, supplemented by other factors such as command, logistics, strategy, cover, and so on. At the same time, the evaluation criteria for soldiers and generals of different ranks were also different. For example, the duty of a general was to command the battle, and could not be simply and crudely judged by the number of enemies killed. Or the role of a strategist was to plan to determine victory from 1,000 miles away, and so on and so forth. The evaluation and statistics of military merit were jointly completed by inspectors and generals stationed by the military office, each performing their own duties. The lowest standard for generals involved was a battalion commander. Both sides supervised each other, and also to prevent the occurrence of false reports of military merit or embezzlement of military merit. Of course, the entire military merit evaluation system, including its operating mechanism, had not been tested in practice, and there were bound to be all kinds of problems. This was a great test of Du Ruhui's ability. Many times, the formulated system was very ideal, but when it was implemented, it was out of shape. The final result was not only not beneficial, but harmful. The cases of reform and failure in history were all like this. Whether it was Wang Mang's transformation of the ideal society or the famous Wang Angshi's reform, there were problems at the level of implementation. Of course, the root cause was that when the reformers formulated the laws, they did not combine it with reality and underestimated the obstacles and difficulties at the level of implementation, and ultimately led to failure. Apart from that, he also had to comprehend the essence of the 4 words step by step. This was only in the game. If it was in the real ancient society, this change wouldn't have been implemented at all. As an emperor, he didn't even dare to think about it. Once it was proposed, there would be countless people with vested interests or traditional guardians who would come out to stop it. However, it was different in the game. There were no aristocrats or Confucian guardians in the entire territory, and the people were relatively open-minded. Because of this, Ouyang Shuo was full of confidence. During this period of time, besides formulating these 2 major systems, the Military Affairs Bureau had also made some progress in improving the logistics guarantee system that Ouyang Shuo had assigned to them before he left Shanghai City. At the military and political meeting, Du Ruhui made a simple report. This time, the logistics department targeted the soldiers' ordinary attire other than their armor as their goal of providing logistical support. Take the saber and shield soldiers as an example. Other than the armor and helmet that they wore, they also had to wear cotton-padded clothes and shoes. Therefore, the logistics division built 2 extra-large quilt factories in Lianzhou County and Laizhou County. The quilt factory mainly produced the army's regular clothes, cotton-padded shoes, quilts, socks, and even towels and other daily necessities. These things might not seem inconspicuous, but they were extremely important to the soldiers. It was already good enough for the ancient army to be able to distribute armor and weapons. The soldiers' regular clothes and underwear were all brought from their own homes. In winter, they still had to send clothes from home. This time, the logistics division was extremely considerate. They took care of all the necessities in one go. There was no doubt that a scientific and reasonable logistics guarantee system was also an important symbol of professionalism in the army. The logistics division was on the right path. After settling the military affairs, the next step was to discuss the structure of Zhaoqing County. Ouyang Shuo still chose Tianshuang County as the administrative center of Zhaoqing County, which was renamed Tianshuang City. Although the Skyfrost City had experienced the chaos of war, its infrastructure was still the best in the entire prefecture. Like Laizhou County, Zhaoqing County was also divided into 5 prefectures. After the meeting, Wulong County would be occupied and its teleportation function destroyed. It would be officially renamed Wulong City as the administrative center of Wulong Prefecture in the northern part of Zhaoqing County. Although Ouyang Shuo liked the teleportation portal in Wulong County very much, he had to give it up. He did not dare to put the control of a teleportation portal in the hands of someone he did not trust. After Chili Strip Prince left Yunnan County, he had already returned to Wulong County. Ouyang Shuo could not trust this person the way he trusted Mulan Yu. After all, they were not familiar with each other. They were just exchanging benefits. After the meeting, Chili Strip Prince would go to a county in Laizhou County to take up his post and leave Zhaoqing County. At the end of the day, Ouyang Shuo was still very wary of players. Yunnan County, the Allied Army's former headquarters, would be renamed Yunnan City. It would be the administrative center of Yunnan Prefecture in Zhaoqing County. Yaogu County and Gunlo County would be under the jurisdiction of Yunnan Prefecture. Originally, Song County was more suitable to be a prefectural administrative center than Yunnan Prefecture. Unfortunately, Song County was completely burned down by Bai Qi, and the people were plunged into misery and suffering. Ouyang Shuo did not plan to rebuild Yunnan County to avoid antagonizing the local people. Because of this, Ouyang Shuo had to carefully consider the candidate for the prefectural magistrate of Yunnan Prefecture. He had to choose someone who had both ability and integrity. He also had to have a certain level of skill to slowly pacify the local people. In the end, Ouyang Shuo chose Chui Shaoxi, the prefectural magistrate of Tianfeng Prefecture in Lianzhou County. Chui Shaoxi was quite accomplished in Tianfeng Prefecture. Tianfeng Prefecture's various indicators were far ahead of the rest of the county. According to the feedback from the monitoring department, the local people also had a very good impression of Chui Shaoxi. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo believed that Chui Shaoxi would be able to govern Yun and Prefecture well. Other than Tianchuan Prefecture, Wulong Prefecture, and Yunnan Prefecture, the remaining prefectures were Shuetai Prefecture and Muge Prefecture. Shuetai Prefecture was located in the south of Zhaoqing County, while Muge Prefecture was close to Jiaozhou County in the east. Ouyang Shuo still chose Du Sijing as the prefectural magistrate of Zhaoqing County. After a period of interaction, Ouyang Shuo had a preliminary judgment of Du Sijing. This person had rich experience in government affairs. He knew how to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. He was also quite tactful. He was quite qualified to be the prefectural magistrate. Name: Du Sijing, King Level, Dynasty Yuan, Dynasty Identity, Prefectural Magistrate of Zhaoqing County, Protectorate of the Southern Border. Occupation: Civil Official Loyalty, 75 points Commander, 50 Martial Power, 35 Intelligence, 65 Politics, 75 Specialties. Wending increases the territory's administrative efficiency by 20, increases the territory's prestige by 10, and increases the territory's integrity by 15. Remarks: Du Sijing first served Kublai in the Fan Prefecture. He learned from Su Heng and worked his way up to the left minister of the Secretariat. During his stay at home, he did some research on medicine and wrote the Jixing extraction prescription. The rest of the prefectural magistrates would be selected by the Administrative Bureau and submitted to Ouyang Shuo for approval. It just so happened that the Administrative Bureau was going to start the official assessment of the whole territory. Zhaoqing County would not be as rushed as Lianzhou County. All the officials had to pass the assessment before they could take up the post. Needless to say, a large number of local officials in Zhaoqing County would have to pack up and leave. Ouyang Shuo wanted to use a thunderous method to deal with this. Currently, Zhaoqing County had an army of more than 200,000 soldiers. There was really no one who could make any waves. After deciding on the structure of Zhaoqing County, Ouyang Shuo left the rest of the matters to the 4 bureaus and the newly appointed Du Sijing to handle together. After going through the transformation of Lianzhou County, the 4 bureaus were already familiar with the work. Taking advantage of the free time, Yu reported to Ouyang Shuo the income and expenditure of the territory for August. Shanghai City had a revenue of 95,000 gold coins. Lianzhou County had a revenue of 55,000 gold coins. Lianzhou County had a revenue of 22,000 gold coins, and Xiongzhou County had a revenue of 84,000 gold coins. In addition to the direct revenue of 80,000 gold coins from the industrial department, the territory's total revenue for August was 336,000 gold coins. Compared to July, the revenue had increased by more than 100,000 gold coins, an increase of an astonishing 40%. There were 3 main pieces of good news. First, Lianzhou County had a revenue for the first time. Although it was not as good as the other 2 counties, it was still a considerable amount. The development of Lianzhou County was enough to prove that expansion was the way to go. Even if the war cost a lot of money, and a lot of money had to be invested in the construction of infrastructure in the early stages, there would be a steady flow of income in the later stages. This deal was not a loss. Second, Xiongzhou County's revenue had directly doubled. With the arrival of the Great Voyage era, Cliff Mountain City's economy had directly experienced an explosive growth, which subsequently led to the entire Xiongzhou County's revenue to a new level. With the current trend, it was not impossible for Xiongzhou County to surpass Lianzhou County. After all, since Shanghai City was separated from Lianzhou County, its competitive advantage had already been reduced by more than 30%. Third, the revenue of the shipbuilding industry had skyrocketed. Also benefiting from the arrival of the Great Voyage era, although the industrial department had followed Ouyang Shua's request and delegated a number of high-quality industries, such as the Three Flower Wine Factory and the Wolf Mountain Mine, the overall revenue did not decrease, but instead increased. Because of this, it also led to a small increase in Shanghai City's revenue. According to Ing Yu's estimation, the dividends brought by the Great Voyage era would continue for a long time. It could be foreseen that in the next 6 months, the territory's finances would be more abundant. This was also the reason why the financial department did not raise any objections to Ouyang Shua's military expansion. August's revenue had increased, but the corresponding transfer payments had decreased. Therefore, in the entire August, the territory had achieved a record net revenue of 185,000 gold coins. With money, naturally, they were full of confidence. To be continued. Chapter 477. P.S. Once again, thank you, apathetic guy, for your previous tips. This chapter is the promised additional chapter. Thank you for your support. With money in his pocket, Ouyang Shua could put some of his ideas into action. During this period of time, Ouyang Shua had been thinking about a problem. The territory had developed to the point where it had 4 counties. If this was in the real ancient times, the size of a territory would be the same as a country. At this point, where should the reformation of the territory go? In his previous life, Ouyang Shua had obtained bits and pieces of territory management experience through the forum. It was no longer enough to guide him in making a long-term plan for the territory. In the 5 years of his previous life, Dichen's territory was about the same as the current Mountain Sea territory. In other words, Ouyang Shua had used less than 2 years to complete the path that Dichen had taken 5 years to walk in his previous life. Therefore, there was no higher level of experience for Ouyang Shua to learn from. At this point, Ouyang Shua had to rely on himself. Whether it was Xiao He, Fan Zhongyan, or the others, although they had historical memories, their thinking was still limited to the ancient times. Therefore, it was not a problem for them to carry out Ouyang Shua's strategy. Xiao He and the others would carry out Ouyang Shua's orders perfectly. There was no need for Ouyang Shua to worry. However, to ask them to stand at the height of the era and guide the territory was a bit too much. Not to mention Xiao He, even the sage strategist Zhang Liang might not be able to do this. It wasn't that they weren't smart or powerful, but that their way of thinking was fundamentally different from the Overlord players. This difference was called the generation gap. To put it more broadly, it was the limitation of the era. In all kinds of historical novels, the male protagonists were able to dominate the world. The modern knowledge of the previous life was only the surface. Their most fundamental advantage was that their thinking was ahead of the ancient people. It was precisely because of this that they could jump out of the fence and forge an unusual path. Ouyang Shua was currently playing the role of such a transmigrator. Therefore, no one could help him. The only one who could help him was himself. Ouyang Shua had expected today's situation since a year ago. Because of this, Ouyang Shua buried himself in his studies, and he ceaselessly sought guidance from Fan Zhongyan and the others. His goal was to enrich himself so that he could guide the territory in the future and serve as a good helmsman. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shua stood up and walked to the window. Outside the window, the small courtyard was still as quiet as before. There was no longer the hustle and bustle of the day. The bright moon hung high in the sky. The pure white moonlight gently sprinkled on the courtyard like a thin silver veil. Under the cover of the night, Ouyang Shua's figure under the moonlight suddenly seemed somewhat lonely. I am the one who stands at the top. The experience of being reborn made Ouyang Shua even more lonely than others. With no one to talk to, there was no way to continue. Ouyang Shua's current accomplishments had already exceeded his expectations when he'd just been reborn. His and Bing Er's situation, compared to his previous life, was completely different. It was like heaven and earth. Logically speaking, Ouyang Shua should be satisfied and should enjoy life properly. Unfortunately, he didn't. The reason why Ouyang Shua wasn't satisfied with the current situation and continued to temper himself was because he wanted to become an overlord that lingered in the heart of a man. When awake, he wields the power of the world. When drunk, he lies on the knees of beauties. Which man in the world had never dreamed of being a hero? Now, Ouyang Shua had this opportunity. Standing at the crossroads, Ouyang Shua didn't want to waste time and let down the good times. Times create heroes, and heroes also create times. The wheel of history pushed Ouyang Shua to his current position, and there was no way back. The road of hegemony was like rowing a boat against the current. If you don't advance, you'll fall back. If Ouyang Shua dared to relax for a moment, countless enemies would pounce on him and tear him to pieces. His ending would be even more miserable than his previous life. How could the road of hegemony be perfect? If Ouyang Shua wanted to obtain the world, he was destined to lose his freedom. You can't have your cake and eat it too. The moonlight was like water. Ouyang Shua's state of mind once again recovered its tranquility. The loneliness just now was like a ripple that quietly spread out in the lake of his heart before continuing to disappear. Ouyang Shua closed the window and returned to the desk in the study. The military and political meeting that was held during the day only solved the current urgent problems. There were still many things that Ouyang Shua needed to summon the ministers one by one to discuss in detail. For example, after the reorganization of the army, the direction of the future attack. Should they head east to attack Jiaozhou County or Shaozhou County, which were in a weakened state? Or should they continue to carry out the previously planned westward strategy and attack Wuzhou County, where Chiyu City was located, and then attack the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom? Speaking of which, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom had been raised by Ouyang Shua for almost a year, and it was already a huge monster. It had to be said that Ouyang Shua's previous prediction was too confident and too optimistic. The current Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was probably not something that Shanghai City could deal with at will. Ouyang Shua didn't expect that Hong Xiuquan's ability to summon surrender was so heaven-defying. Think about it. Shanghai City had gone through a series of bitter battles to conquer Liizhou County and Zhaoqing County. On the other hand, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's attack on Zhun and Guilin County was as easy as pie. When the two were compared, it was obvious who was superior. This monster had become a great threat to Shanghai City. Nurturing a tiger only invited disaster. In the future, Shanghai City and the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom were destined to have a fierce battle. Other than that, there was the issue of the internal reform of the territory. The military rank system and the military merit system were just a small test for Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua's next step was to prepare for an even bigger change. His eyes were set on public affairs, or rather, public services, which had been neglected before. Public services were the core concept of public administration and government reform in modern society. They included strengthening the construction of public facilities in urban and rural areas, developing education, technology, culture, health, sports, and other public services, and providing a guarantee for the public to participate in social, economic, political, and cultural activities. Projecting into the game world, except for sports, all of them had their own needs. The first was education. This went without saying. From private schools to higher education in Southwest University China Hall, the purpose was to inspire the people and nurture talents for the territory. The second was technology. Technology was the number one productive force. This sentence still had a guiding meaning in the game world. Otherwise, the various technical manuals wouldn't have been fought over by the lords. The third was culture. Culture and education were interdependent and restrained. There was no need to say more. The last was sanitation. This sanitation, in addition to public health, actually also included public medical care and other contents. These four areas all had flaws in the planning of the territory, and all of them had hidden dangers. To put it in simpler terms, the previous extensive planning of the territory needed to be carefully managed. Take education as an example. The educational institutions of the territory, Southwest University China Hall, and the Military Martial Arts Lecture Hall, needless to say, were the highest educational institutions. Not only in the territory, but in the entire China region, they were also becoming more and more influential. The private schools also flourished under Ouyang Shua's guidance. The crux of the problem was that between the private schools and the highest educational institutions, there was a gap in the territory's educational institutions. In ancient times, a more complete education system started from elementary school, then county school, academy, and finally the imperial college, forming a complete chain. Strictly speaking, this chain was also present in the territory. Every county in the territory also had academies as a secondary educational institution. Southwest University China Hall was actually playing the role of the imperial college. The problem wasn't the gap in the academies, but the curriculum. In the elementary school stage, there was no need to mention the 3-character classic, 100 family names, and other introductory books. Southwest University China Hall had 8 schools, which could be considered 100 flowers blooming. What was neglected was the county and county-level academies. Basically, all the counties and counties were seized through war. The academies that were originally built in the territory were naturally inherited after the territory was occupied. These academies all taught traditional classics and history. In other words, the counties and counties academies could only send students to Southwest University China Hall to enter the School of Classics. The other academies, such as the law school, business school, physics school, architecture school, and so on, none of them matched. The other academies all recruited students from society or simply the basic government officials to study in the academies, and then they would be sent back to the factory to be reformed. This was definitely not a long-term solution. Before this, the problem wasn't prominent because Shanghai City only had one county. Southwest University China Hall could still accept students from society within the territory. But now, the territory already occupied 4 counties. Even if a carpenter from Zhaoqing County was willing to travel thousands of miles and spend a month on the road to study at the physics school of Southwest University China Hall, the academy had to be able to accommodate them. The students from the 4 counties would definitely fill Southwestern University to the brim. Therefore, it was necessary to set up a transfer station in the county. In other words, the county's academies had to offer the same subjects, such as mathematics, business, law, and so on, so that the local students could enter the school nearby. At the same time, it would also use the local academies to screen the students again and again. Only the most outstanding among them would be qualified to be recommended to study at Southwest University China Hall. In this way, not only would the problems of the students be solved, but the quality of the students at Southwest University China Hall would also be improved so that it could truly match the status of the highest educational institution. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a great waste of the territory's educational resources if great masters like Han Fei and Su Xing had to teach some useless people who couldn't become great people? In addition, once this system was established, it would automatically form a perfect talent selection chain. In other words, through the layers of examinations in the academies, the territory would be able to select talents even without passing the imperial examination. Anyone who successfully graduated from Southwest University China Hall will be the most outstanding talent in the territory. To be continued. Chapter 478. Was Ouyang Shua's idea good? Of course it was good, because it was simply a copy of the modern education system. There was no need to pass the imperial examinations. All they had to do was go through rounds of entrance exams, and they would be able to select qualified talents. However, there were many difficulties in making this idea a reality. First, there was a shortage of teachers. The main map of the game was still dominated by the Confucian culture. The talents spawned from the refugees were also mainly Confucian scholars. If he wanted to add other subjects to the county schools, he would need to have corresponding teachers. Right now, the only place that could train teachers was the Southwest University China Academy. First, he could select a group of existing teachers from each academy and send them to the county school to preside over the teaching. Second, he could select some of the graduating students to become teachers. The two worked together to set up the framework of the county school. At the moment, it was already not easy to set up various subjects at the county school level. The prefectural and county schools didn't have such conditions at all. Ouyang Shuo was impatient, but he would not spoil things through excessive enthusiasm. After the county school was popularized, the graduating students could be sent to the prefectural school, so on and so forth until it was pushed to the county school and even the most basic private school. In short, it would go from top to bottom. Therefore, this was destined to be a long process. Ouyang Shuo estimated that to complete this cycle, it would take at least 2 years. Secondly, the increase in subjects would cause a sharp increase in education expenses. Education expenses were part of the public budget. Within the territory, whether it was the private school, the academy, or the Southwest University China Academy, all education was free. All education expenses would be covered by the territory's budget. As the number of subjects increased, the number of students would also increase. What followed was an increase in education expenses, including the expansion of the academy, the salaries of the teachers, the maintenance of the academy, the daily expenses of the students, the expenses of the ink, and so on. Therefore, if it was not for the territory's financial situation, Ouyang Shuo would not have dared to implement this reform. Thirdly, how to ensure fairness. Fairness in education had always been a difficult problem. The fairness of student recruitment, evaluation, recommendation, and so on were all difficult problems. All 3 problems were very thorny, but once they were solved, it would not only affect the imperial examination system, but also the entire bureaucracy of the territory. It would have an unpredictable impact. How? In China's ancient officialdom, officials, and officials were actually 2 completely different classes. The 2 could not be interacted with each other. No matter how much an official was demoted, he would not be demoted to an official. No matter how much an official was promoted, he would not be able to become an official. Officials and civil servants together formed a complete bureaucratic ecosystem. An official was a master, a superior person. An official was a servant, a subordinate person who served the official. For example, a supervisor, a clerk, an accountant, an advisor, and so on. As the saying goes, a government office made of iron is made of water. An official was appointed once every 3 years, but it was not the same for an official. It could even be hereditary. The officials were from outside, while the officials were local. The officials would leave before they could even warm their seats, while the officials would take root here. After the father finished his work, the son would do it. The advantage of these different destinations was that it was impossible for an official to form his power network in one place. On the other hand, because the officials were local, they were familiar with the customs of the area, which was also beneficial to the implementation of the policy. However, there would be problems at the level of implementation. For example, officials would hold officials hostage and paralyze government affairs, and so on. The complicated relationship between officials and civil servants could not be explained clearly even if they talked for 3 days and 3 nights. The basic public education that Ouyang Shuo was preparing to implement was an attempt to blur the boundaries between officials. It could be said that it touched upon the taboo of the officialdom. The addition of various subjects, including mathematics and law, was equivalent to training officials at the technical level. Ancient officials and officials were 2 completely different selection channels. Now, Ouyang Shuo placed the officials under the same framework of the school. This move could be said to be earth-shattering. To be honest, Ouyang Shuo could not make a clear judgment on what would happen in the future. Fortunately, this was only the game world. If it was in the real ancient times, if Ouyang Shuo dared to propose such a change, he would probably be kicked off the throne by the gentry and bureaucrats. In the game, the basic education that Ouyang Shuo implemented was at least very beneficial to the professionalization of the territory's government affairs. It was equivalent to the civil service system in the real world. In this way, Ouyang Shuo did not need to worry about the local petty officials holding officials hostage and affecting the implementation of the government affairs. This was because the future officials did not need to be local, nor could they be hereditary. At that time, the various changes that Ouyang Shuo implemented would not be easily changed at the level of implementation. It cannot be said that there would be no resistance, but at least the difficulties that they would encounter would be much smaller than the changes in history. Because of this, Ouyang Shuo was determined to firmly implement this change. If it was only to open the minds of the people, he did not need to make such a big fuss. The implementation of basic education was to lay the foundation for Ouyang Shuo's countless changes in the future. The three thorny problems in education needed a strong department to push forward. The current Department of Culture and Education was barely able to bear this heavy responsibility. The problem was that Ouyang Shuo's ambition was far from this. Other than education, technology, culture, and health needed to be changed. With the Mo family's presence and the gathering of experts, Shanghai City could be said to be the leader in the high-end research field. Even so, Ouyang Shuo was not satisfied. His goal was to promote the level of technology in the county. In the field of culture, there was temporarily no need to change. The title of 100 Holy Land had already allowed Shanghai City to be the leader in the field of culture. What was needed was an appropriate guidance and control. The field of health was Ouyang Shuo's second challenge after the field of education. Establishing a complete public health system was Ouyang Shuo's goal. In ancient times, whether it was a doctor or a doctor, they were all private. The only ones who truly belonged to the government were the imperial doctors who served the royal family. Therefore, the problem of how difficult and expensive it was to see a doctor in ancient times was even worse than in modern times. Many commoners sold their children, went bankrupt, or simply waited for death because they did not have the money to treat their illnesses. His fate was so miserable that no one could describe it. Basically, a serious illness could cause a family to fall into the abyss. Ouyang Shuo wanted to build a public health system to solve this problem. He was prepared to turn the government hospital, which was a non-governmental organization, into a semi-government organization. Unlike the lack of teachers for the implementation of basic education, the territory did not lack doctors. The development of the government hospital was still very rapid, and there were hundreds of doctors in it. There were also doctors in various places. As long as these wandering doctors were all hired into the local government hospital, the problem of doctors could be solved. The problem of medical reform did not lie in doctors, but in funds. To realize Ouyang Shuo's vision of universal health care, the operating expenses of the government hospital, doctors' salaries, and other expenses must be borne by the territory's finance. It could even be said that the price of medicinal herbs must also be favorable, and no profits could be sought. In this way, the burden of public health expenditure on the territory's finance would be an astronomical figure. In other words, in the area of medical treatment, it was impossible to be completely free like in school. Otherwise, no matter how healthy the territory's finance was, it would not be able to support it. It could be foreseen that education and medical treatment would become the largest part of the territory's finance. How to charge the commoners for medical treatment, how to ensure the supply of medicinal herbs, how to ensure the rights and interests of the doctors in the government hospital, how to negotiate with the major medicinal herb suppliers, and so on, were all problems that needed to be solved. Without a specialized department to control it, it was impossible to implement. Based on the above considerations, Ouyang Shuo was prepared to implement a structural change in the Department of Culture and Education. What he could do was to design a blueprint for the top level of the design. Ouyang Shuo planned to change the name of the Department of Culture and Education to the Department of Culture and Health, responsible for the territory's science and technology, education, culture, and health, and other basic public services. After the name change, it would still be under the jurisdiction of the administrative office. The newly established Department of Culture and Education would have 4 departments: the Department of Science and Technology, a Department of Education, the Department of Culture, and the Department of Health. If the former director of the Department of Culture and Education, Su Shuda, were to be placed in charge of the Department of Culture and Education, it would be somewhat difficult for him. After all, the newly established Department of Culture and Education was already facing all sorts of difficult changes that involved all aspects of the territory. Whether it was in terms of ability or experience, Su Shuda was not qualified to take on this great responsibility. Ouyang Shual planned to have Su Shuda become the director of the Department of Education and continue to work in the field of education. The first director of the Department of Culture and Education had to be a powerful person at the helm. Logically speaking, the current director of the administrative office, Fan Zhongyin, was a good candidate. In terms of experience, Fan Zhongyin was an old minister of the territory, and in terms of ability, Duke Fan was also qualified to take on this great responsibility. Ouyang Shua's original plan was to have Xiao He replace Fan Zhongyin as the director of the administrative office at an appropriate time. Unfortunately, Fan Zhongyin was currently leading the evaluation of the territory's officials, so it was not appropriate for him to be transferred. Moreover, Ouyang Shuo was not in Shanghai City for a long time, so he needed someone like Xiao He to handle the day-to-day affairs of the Southern Border Protectorate. Thus, this was not the appropriate time that Ouyang Shuo had anticipated. After thinking it over, Ouyang Shuo could only temporarily have Xiao He take on the role of the director of the Department of Culture and Education. This appointment could also be considered a good foundation for Xiao He to take on this role in the future. After all, the effects of this change on the territory could not be estimated. Once Xiao He completed this important task, his experience in the territory would not be inferior to that of any of the other ministers. It just so happened that Xiao He was currently in charge of the day-to-day affairs of the Protectorate, as well as the director of the Department of Culture and Education. This would also be beneficial to his reforms in the fields of education and health. This once more exposed the predicament that Shanghai City was in when it came to civil officials. Ouyang Shuo was currently treating Xiao He as an omnipotent treasure that would be nailed to wherever he was needed. Apart from him, there was no one else he could use. To be continued. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.